Hello everyone. If you are new to my channel, then consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do it, thanks. By the way, I also have a Luffy fan fiction channel. If you are interested, the link is in the description. Dragonslayer by KitsuneDragon. He said he saw great potential in my small body and he raised me. Because of him I lived, I learned, and I finally found someone I could call friend, even if he didn't call me the same. I am his son. I am his student, the Dragonslayer of Acnologia. I don't own anything. Adios.
Fairy Tale Guildhouse, Magnolia Town. Fury the guys were shouting and making bets as Elfman arm wrestled with Guildarts. The red-haired crash magic user was by no means a weak man, as the majority of Fairy Tale's mages were capable of shattering wood through pure physical strength. And despite his flesh and blood arm being his non-dominant limb, the ace of Fairy Tale was by not any weaker for it. However, against a giant like Elfman, whose hand could have easily held Guildarts' head in its palm, the challenge seemed to somewhat excite him. The white-haired takeover mage gave a small smirk to his opponent as he turned to Kana, who had been managing the betting pools. "Oi, Kana, gimme a countdown." Osu, Kana downed the remnants of alcohol from her barrel, slamming it down harshly into the floor as she hopped to her feet. "Alright everybody, count down with me." The other members of Fairy Tale all cheered alongside their resident alcoholic. "Let's see if Elfman can back up his bravado. Can he finally stick it to my shitty old man? Do you really have to call me that in front of everyone? You took 17 years to figure out I was your daughter," she argued with a deadpan gaze. "Ergo, thou art a shitty old man. You're lucky I love you, Kana." Kana grinned widely at her father before raising 3 fingers into the air, and the guild responded in stereo. 3, 2, 1. Elfman suddenly released a burst of magic energy as his arm glowed and transformed. "Take over." Beast King arm. His arm transformed into the clawed, furry arm of his Beast King, and a sudden surge of strength caught even Guildarts off guard as he watched his arm being pushed down. The wooden table cracked beneath their elbows with each passing second as Guildarts' arm grew closer and closer to the table's surface. "Elfman, you've gotten good at using your magic since I've been gone." Guildarts praised the younger mage, and Elfman managed a confident smile through his grunts of effort. "But, you've still got a lot to learn before you're ready to beat me." Guildarts suddenly released his grip on Elfman's hand and pulled his arm back. Elfman's eyes widened as the ace of Fairy Tale suddenly used the space left between his hand and the table to then shift his arm back forward with a surge of strength and clasped Elfman's hand in a more powerful grip. The momentum behind his motion pushed Elfman's arm back, and earth met sky for the Strauss male as the red-haired crash magic user had sent Elfman off his seat and slamming through the wooden table. The table was no longer able to resist the abuse it had been dealt by the 2 mages, and so the table shattered as Elfman was sent straight through to the floor. "Wooah!" The guild released cries of excitement and awe as Elfman's own shocked expression shifted between his own hand and the smiling face of the S-class mage before him. What the hell was that? Just a simple utilization of speed over power. I pulled back to make a space between my hand and yours so that I could push my hand forward with some speed and override your strength with pure momentum. Though, I will admit, I was only going 40% my full strength, so don't be too disappointed because it shows you've gotten a lot stronger." Guildarts grinned as he grabbed Elfman by the forearm and easily pulled the taller mage back to his feet, clapping him on the shoulder. The older mage was then grabbed by his automail arm as his daughter raised said limb into the air. "Winner, my shitty old man." Guildarts' sweat dropped at the brown-haired woman's proclamation and could not resist the urge to shake his head at the rest of the guild as their cheers of excitement once again filled the guild house. "Again. Very lucky that I love you, Kana." "Love you too, Otu-san." She put emphasis on each syllable as she watched Guildarts' face seem to melt into an expression of pure fatherly joy. "But not as much as my booze." The red-haired man sighed, shaking his head as he watched his daughter release his automail arm and latch onto the barrel that Mira was supplying to the brown-haired mage. "She's my daughter all right," he thought as he watched her uncork the barrel and begin to chug its contents. "Oi, Guildarts." A smirk adorned the S-class mage's face as he turned to the guild's resident ice godslayer. "You up for a round 2? "Meh, why not?" Guildarts shrugged. "Judging from your overconfident asshole persona, you need to be taken down a peg or 2. Also, please stop taking your clothes off in front of me." Gray scowled as he glanced down at his body and found his shirt resting on the floor 10 feet away from his current position. How the hell did it get all the way over there? These events, which contributed to the makings of a normal day in Fairy Tale, were just what the Ice Godslayer needed after all the madness that had occurred in Edelus. He continued to glare at his discarded shirt, not aware of him unconsciously removing his pants as he prepared to drag over another table to place between himself and the ace of Fairy Tale. He suddenly paused in both retrieving the table and taking off his pants. His ears twitched and his head perked up as he heard an odd sound. Sounds like it's coming from outside the guild. He mumbled to himself as he turned to the wide open doors of the guild. His eyes narrowed as he looked out at the blue sky, clouds drifting lazily by. His obsidian orbs then widened as one of the clouds suddenly had a hole punched through it. The image of a fast approaching object made itself known as it revealed itself to be the source of the sound, that very sound growing louder and louder with each passing second. He then took note that the object was a dark shade of blue and the sound he heard began to register as an actual word. A word that he knew to be own name. Gray saw Ama, by the dragons. Gray muttered. His head swung from side to side as he searched for cover. He had taken too long to realize it was her and so he raised his arms. No time to dodge, got a block. The other members of Fiore's strongest guild all watched event unfold and could only wince and offer their condolences to the poor ice make user. The full weight of a 17-year-old, blue-haired water Dragonslayer flying in through the guild's entrance at near Mach speed slammed into his arms, but it did little to reduce the force behind her impact as Chojuro released Juvia from his grip and their momentum sent both elemental mages rolling across the guild floor. Tables, chairs and people were not spared as they were scattered like 10 pins before the two mages came to a halt with Gray groaning in pain as he lay on his back, both it and his chest a glowing red from the impacts of both Juvia's face and the floor. Gray-sama. 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 The daughter of Levia nuzzled the source of her unrequited love with a content sigh. She then adjusted herself, sitting up and straddling the pained form of her beloved. Juvia has returned for you, Gray-sama. Did Gray-sama miss Juvia as much as Juvia missed Gray-sama? Gray groaned. As of 5 seconds ago, not anymore. Juvia blinked her blue eyes owlishly and tilted her head as she processed the Ice Godslayer's words. She then bore an intense blush along with a toothy grin as she once again embraced the shirtless ice user. Juvia knew it. Juvia knew Gray-sama loved her, otherwise Gray-sama would never have said he missed Juvia. Juvia. Gray released a light sob from his place on the ground. Why must you do this, Juvia? Why? Because Juvia loves Gray-sama as Gray-sama is Juvia's chosen mate and must continuously act to make her claim. The water Dragonslayer replied with a stiff nod before turning back just as Gajeel was flown in through the doors by Panther Lily. See Gajeel-san. Juvia told you Gray-sama loved her. Oh dear, what have I done? Chojuro muttered as he nervously adjusted his glasses. Well, you probably assisted in something that would have happened normally. Gajeel replied as he was rested onto the ground. The moment his feet touched up from between Gajeel's shoulders and promptly sat himself down atop his Dragonslayer partner's head. Panther Lily tilted his head in confusion, a sweat drop forming on the back of his head as he continued to observe the rather intimate scene between Juvia and Gray. So, Gajeel? Yeah, Lily? This act of affection from Juvia? This isn't an Earthland custom? Nope. Gajeel replied with a shrug. That's just Juvia being Juvia. She's got it really bad for that idiot icicle. Should I stop them? Chojuro asked, a blush adorning his face as he watched Juvia beginning to openly grind her body against Gray's own. Tch, this is very indecent behavior. Leave the girl alone, Chojuro. This is something you're going to have to get used to with Juvia being your partner, so let her have her fun. The son of Metallicana said with a nonchalant tone. He then shifted his crimson eyes downward as the sound of approaching footsteps came to a halt in front of him. Brown eyes stared up at him as Levi gave a pout of disappointment. Gajeel. Why'd you take so long to get back? Levi asked. Juvia and I had some stuff to take care of. Dragonslayer business. His red eyes then brightened as he turned his gaze skyward as a gesturing motion to the panther-like exceed seated upon his head. But on the plus side, I got me my own cat partner. His name is Panther Lily. But I call him Lily. Ain't he so much cooler than that stupid happy? Pleased to meet your acquaintance, Levi. You know my name? Of course, Gajeel speaks quite highly of you. He says you're very bright, which, in his own words, is a good thing because everyone else are a bunch of idiots. The blue-haired solid script mage blinked owlishly as she shifted her gaze between Gajeel and the floor. You think I'm bright? Levi asked with a small blush. Of course. You're the smartest one in this entire guild. Levi's blush only intensified, a growing smile forming on her face as she registered the words of praise. I see. Panther Lily nodded, though when you mentioned Levi to me I assumed she'd have bigger. Levi's smile dropped and she felt as if an arrow was shot through her chest. I was going to say taller. Another metaphorical arrow nailed her in the head and Levi felt her legs give out from under her. She fell to her knees and held her hands against her chest. Gajeel and Panther Lily sweat dropped as they watched the diminutive mage mutter to herself. Certain words and phrases like fairy tale girls, worthless pieces of fat, and gargantuan Amazons were a few of things they managed to pick up on. I think we hit a nerve. Lily whispered. Yeah. I forgot to mention that she's kinda sensitive about that stuff given how everyone in the guild is taller and the girls have bigger than her. Then why did you say what you said? Shut up. Gajeel scowled before turning back to the sole female of Team Shadowgear. Oi, Squirt. You okay? You want a pet, Lily? Levi stopped her mutterings and Gajeel internally shuddered as he was faced with the most indifferent expression he had ever had the displeasure of looking at. Her brown eyes then shifted to meet the black ones of the sword-wielding Exceed. The two stared at one another, childish curiosity meeting feline apathy as a period of silence passed between the two of them. "Cute," she muttered her thought aloud. She then looked up at Gajeel. "I want to pet him." "Sure. I think this something that deserves my own input." Lily was effectively ignored as the Iron Dragonslayer handed him over to the diminutive solid script mage. Lily was ready to voice his objections, but immediately became compliant when she began to scratch behind his ears. "Never mind. I'm fine here." "Gajeel, you are no longer my partner. I like Levi better." "That isn't even funny, Lily." Gajeel deadpanned before his eyes brightened in realization. "Oh, wait, Squirt. I forgot to show you this. No wait, everyone needs to see this. Oi. Shitheads, look at what my cat can do." All the guild members became silent as they turned their heads in the direction of the Iron Dragonslayer. Some were a bit more aggravated than others due to not taking to being called shitheads very kindly. "What is it, Gajeel?" Mary Jane asked. Gajeel's toothy grin threatened to split his face as he took Panther Lily from Levi and rested him in the center of the growing circle of mages. "Do the thing, Lily." "Gajeel." Panther Lily's sweat dropped. "Using my ability takes a great deal of magic energy to perform. Surely you don't expect me to waste such power for a simple act such as entertaining the other members of this guild?" "That's exactly what I expect you to do." Gajeel immediately replied, causing Panther Lily to face fault. "Now come on, just do the thing." "Fine, but I'm doing this out of simple amusement again after this. Never again." Yeah, quit bellyaching and just show them your cool shit." "I would just to say that I now officially stand by my statement that I like Levi better than you." Panther Lily sighed at how his partner simply gave him the middle finger before giving him a motion of encouragement for him to transform. The ebony-furred Exceed untied the bustermarn from his back and all eyes watched in fascination as his body glowed with white light. All eyes widened as they looked upon the 6-foot-tall, anthropomorphic feline. "Ooh. That's right, let it sear itself into your feeble brains that my cat is the best fucking cat in the history of cats." Gajeel cackled. "That blue-furred fish-eating piece of fluff is no match for the level of epicness that is Lily." "I think a name like Lily kinda lowers the coolness factor a bit," Jet said. "No one cares about your opinion." Lily and Gajeel snapped at the orange-haired speed magic user. "The only opinion that matters right now is Salamander's. You see this shit, Salamander? My cat is the best fucking cat and—" The black-haired mage looked around the crowd, his outburst dying down in a hum of confusion as he scratched his head. "Where's Salamander?" Natsu said he needed to go and take a walk and think about some stuff. Levi replied as she caught Lily in her arms after he reverted back to his original form. Liu Chan went with him too. "Salamander, take a walk? Think?" Gajeel looked down at Levi in disbelief. "That's impossible. Salamander doesn't think." "He has a point," the other guild members commented. Gajeel released a growl in annoyance. "Man, I really wanted to show off Lily. Where would he go at this time of the day?" Outskirts of Magnolia Town, a gentle breeze blew through the land and Lucy couldn't help but marvel at its beauty. The grass was a healthy shade of emerald green that came to a halt a few feet away from the edge of the cliff that overlooked a few grassy hills and a wide river which glittered in the noonday sun as it meandered through the valley that the hills created. White clouds drifted lazily through the wide expanse of blue above their heads with a flock of birds flying in a V formation towards their nesting grounds. Lucy would have verbally commented on the beauty of the location, and she would have actually teased Natsu for having allowed her to come with him to such a pretty and secluded area. Of course she couldn't make that joke since firstly, Happy was there with them and also because brown eyes reflected the saddened expression on her face as she shifted her gaze away from the scenery and focused on the images of her best friend and the blue-furred Exceed. The celestial spirit mage remained silent as she looked towards the fire Dragonslayer. She cast a momentary glance at the dome-shaped hideout made of sticks which had entrance big enough for a child to fit through. "You said you two made this back when you were kids, right?" "Yup," Natsu grinned toothily. "Best secret hideout ever made on this side of Fury." "I'm surprised you were able to make this last so long," Lucy commented. Natsu grin morphed into a small smile. "I come here every day when I'm not busy at the guild to make sure I'm just as surprised as you that it hasn't fallen over." "Think you can still fit inside?" Lucy joked. She then sweat dropped when the pink-haired Dragonslayer gained a thoughtful expression and proceeded to put his thoughts into action. His entire head and torso were now inside the small dome with his butt sticking up in the air as if he were in a downward dog yoga position. "Hey, Luce? Yes, Natsu? I don't think I can still fit inside." Whether it was from his current predicament or from the concerned tone in his muffled voice, Happy and Lucy could not help but laugh at the Dragonslayer, their laughter only increasing as he pulled himself out of the hideout and snorted out the little pieces of dirt and stick that he happened to inhale. He stuck out his tongue at his two best friends like the mature mage that he was before making his way over to sit in front of the hideout. Or rather, what was in front of it? Happy sat down on the pink-haired mage's left, while Lucy made herself comfortable on the right. The three members of Fairy Tail looked upon the gravestone with somber expressions. The grave was an approximately 2-foot-tall tapered pentagon that was made of gray stone and rested atop a 1-foot-tall cuboid made of the same material. The face of the grave bore the image of an upside-down tapered pentagon with what looked like tassels having been carved to hang from the lowest point of the pentagon. 5 lines were carved on either side of the pentagon to stretch across from the pentagon's vertical edges to the edges of the gravestone itself and were made in such a way that it gave the pentagon the appearance that it was shining, and the lines were representing the image of rays of light. Decorating the face of the upside-down pentagon was the symbol of Fairy Tail. Its once bright red image now faded and dulled from the passage of time. At its base, the grave had few words inscribed into it. Lysana Strauss, X 767-782. You disappeared. I'm sorry I couldn't find you. It's a very pretty gravestone. Lucy commented. I personally got one for here. Natsu stated. Mira and Elfman. Everyone at the guild pitched in to officially have her buried at the cathedral's cemetery, and that's usually where Mira and Elfman go on the anniversary of her death. But me, Lysana and I, we would always come here to play and talk and stuff. We found Happy's egg one day in the forest and we hatched it together, right here. I thought it was a dragon egg. You would. Happy snorted. Yeah, Natsu chuckled. We spent most of our time together here at this spot. So, I wanted to kinda keep it like that. I got this gravestone specifically for her and myself so that she'd always be here at our hideout. Can you? Lucy looked back at the gravestone and pointed at the inscription. Can you tell me what that means? Since this is your personal gravestone for her, it's probably something you hold close to the heart. I don't want to dig up any harsh feelings for you, and if you don't want to talk about it, I completely understand. Insert music. Fairy Tail Suiyoku Mezumeru Tamashi. Nah, it's alright Luz, the son of Igneal said with a shake of his head. He turned to Happy and patted his partner on the head affectionately. This was a bit before Happy was born, back when we were kids. Natsu smiled softly as he recalled the memory of his childhood days with Lysana. She had gotten lost from going into the forest. I searched for her for so long until I finally found her. She was crying her eyes out and she couldn't have been happier to see me, that stupid crybaby. She had asked me afterwards that if she ever got lost again, if I would find her. I made a promise. His hands clenched into tight fists as he gritted his teeth. I promised her that if she ever disappeared again that I would find her, that I would always find her. Natsu. But yeah, that's what the inscription means. The Fire Dragonslayer said. It's quite literal. And when I couldn't find her that day, I promised that I would find her, and when I couldn't find her, Lucy. I broke my promise and I let her down. So the reason you looked as happy as you did when you saw her face again in Edelus. She used to be the person that I would have one day liked to make her my everything. She was kind, strong, courageous. She was like a living embodiment of the innocence and heart that Ji-chan would talk about that fairy tale represented when we were younger. Of course, things have changed now that we're older, but still. Lysana and I grew up with her, we did everything together. She supported me and had my back through thick and thin even during the moments before she died. We raised Happy together, and when we were kids, she would say I was her husband and she was the wife with Happy as our baby. As a kid, I got embarrassed like hell when she told me that, but when we got older, I would have one day liked to have made that idea into something real. Lucy frowned as she looked at the Fire Dragonslayer as he blinked rapidly. The sun shone down upon them and the brown-eyed celestial spirit mage caught the glint of her best friend's tears as he fought to prevent them from falling. The moment she saw them, her own emotional barriers began to break down, tears of her own forming in her eyes. Her fists were clenched as tightly as how her heart was feeling in her chest. You loved her, he nodded, without a doubt. Lucy watched as he held his hand out to the gravestone, but his arm stopped just short from actually making contact. When I saw her again, when I saw her Edelus counterpart at least, I thought I would never see her face again, those blue eyes and white hair. I never thought I would ever hear her laugh, and I never thought I would get the chance to touch her. She was right in front of me, and I knew we had a goal in mind when we were in Edelus. We had shit to do with the Fujin and Wendy, so I didn't let it get to me, but now that I'm back here, Lucy, it almost broke me to see that she was right in front of me, so close, and yet, it wasn't her, it wasn't this world's, it wasn't my Lysana Strauss. Sometimes, the universe is just so fucking unfair. The tightening feeling in her chest increased and Lucy gritted her teeth. It was almost exactly the same feeling she felt when she went to her mother's gravesite, when she learned that Layla Heartfilia had died, but there was one clear difference between the sorrow she felt back then and the sympathy she felt beside Natsu. It was the feeling of jealousy she felt. She couldn't resist it. She couldn't resist the feelings that came with how much emotion and care Natsu spoke with when he talked about Lysana. It made her angry at herself because she knew it was an asshole thing to do. To feel such things in the face of your grieving friend, how could she let herself do such a thing? It pissed her off to no end and she wanted to just have an out-of-body experience so she could punch herself in the face and tell her to stop being jealous. Unfortunately, she was not capable of such magecraft and so she could only do one thing, and that was to swallow it, push it down and in spite of the emotional pain she would be forced to endure, do what she did best, be the friend he needed. She placed herself on her knees and wrapped Natsu in a comforting embrace which the pink-haired Dragonslayer was more than welcoming to receive. She rubbed his back and kissed him atop his head. "You're right, Natsu. The world is fucking unfair, but you're wrong about letting her down." Lucis' conviction was strong and the fire Dragonslayer looked up at his guildmate with wide-eyed expression on his tear-streaked face. "You couldn't prevent what happened. People die, Natsu, but I'm sure that if you had been there when it all happened, you would have done everything in your power to fight and stop it all." She cupped his face in her hands and kissed him on the forehead. "You are a kind," she kissed him on the cheek. "Generous," she kissed his other cheek. "And strong person." She against his own and stared deeply into his dark-colored eyes. "You may be an idiot, but if you think for 1 second that the man I look up to is someone who lets people down and goes back on his word, then you're not just an idiot. You're a damned fool and you will be for the rest of your life if you keep thinking that just because you couldn't prevent Lisanna's death that you've let her down." Intense chocolate brown eyes stared into shocked coal-black ones. They felt each other's breaths against their faces. "Lucy. Natsu's face moved forward and the world seemed to slow down for the former heiress. Lucy could feel her heart pounding in her chest as she registered just how close they were, and just how much the distance was closing. "Natsu, Lucy, what are you?" Happy's voice fell on deaf ears as the two mages drew closer and closer to one another. Lucy's mind raced. This was what she wanted. She cared for the pink-haired mage as much as her heart would allow her to, and she held no doubt that there was the possibility that she cared for him more than that. She showed a bit of that affection before he fought those demons with gray back on Edelus, kissing him on the cheek before he went off to battle. She could go further with him, right at this very moment. She could be there for him in his moment of vulnerability and grief, be his rock and be the shoulder to cry on and tell him everything will be alright. She wanted to be all those things and everything else for him, but her grip on the Dragonslayer's face suddenly tightened and then, she pushed him back. "Not now. Not like this," she thought. The motion caught Natsu off guard and he watched as Lucy looked down at the ground with a deep frown on her face, her bangs shielding her eyes from view. She then turned her face away from the ground and looked at the gravestone of Lisanna Strauss. "Lu. How did she die, Natsu?" The question acted as the double whammy for Lucy, catching Natsu off guard. The rose-haired Dragonslayer felt Lucy let go of his face and set herself back down on the ground. She wiped away the tears that she had been holding back, her gaze still focused on the grave. What? I want to know. When we were at the fairy tale in Edelus, the Fujin told me about how Lisanna Strauss died, and even though I had been at the guild for these past 6 months, I never once heard of her nor saw her before until that moment in Edelus. I asked him if he would tell me what happened, but despite everything that he has his respect for the dead and those related to them. He said if I wanted to know, then it would be your story to tell." Lucy focused her attention onto her guildmate this time. "You told me basically everything about her and your relationship with her. I now know a bit more than I did before, but I still don't know how she died." Natsu blinked slowly as he glanced back at Happy. The blue-furred Exceed could only blink as he was still trying to process what exactly had happened, or almost happened, right in front of his face. Insert music. Sword art online in your past, alright. The salamander of fairy tale swallowed the lump that had formed in his throat before nodding his head stiffly. "Well, how Lisanna died, I wasn't there when it all happened, but the three of them. Mira, Elfman and Lisanna, they went on a mission in X-782. The mission was to go into the mountains and deal with a monster that was terrorizing nearby villages and travelers. It was out for blood as there were reports of people dying and rune knights who were sent to investigate and find the bodies. They found them, but they lost a couple of their members when they tried to fight the thing. So, who better to fight a beast than those who could turn into them?" Lucy unknowingly held her breath as she waited for Natsu to continue his story. "So they went off to fight it, but it was too strong. They said it could crush boulders with its fists and it even held its own against Mirajane's Satan soul. The fight dragged on for hours and the thing was barely winded. They were all low on magic, they were wounded and there was no way out. They would have died on that day, but Elfman. He made a last-ditch effort to try and win the fight and save his sisters. I would and could never blame him for what he did for the sake of his family, and to this day he still blames himself for what happened." "What happened?" "He was still inexperienced at his takeover magic. It was why up until after the Phantom Lord War he never attempted a full-body takeover spell. He tried to do it on the beast. He succeeded in performing the spell. But the thing about takeover magic is that your mind and will, your very soul needs to be strong enough to handle the form that you want to control." Lucy finished before her eyes widened in realization. "No, you're telling me that?" "Yeah." Natsu frowned. "Elfman lost control of his beast form." Lisanna tried to talk to him, calm him down and turn back to normal, but he didn't listen, he was gone. Mira said she watched it all happen. She watched her brother take his monstrous arm and swing it at Lisanna. She flew through the air like a broken rag doll, like a puppet with its strings cut. She hit the ground hard. When they brought the body back and they ran an autopsy, the entire left side of her torso had been broken. Her organs ruptured, and if that hadn't killed her, then the impact she made with the ground would have, as she had gotten severe head trauma. Essentially, Elfman killed his little sister. That event traumatized them, and it's the reason why Mira Jane never went on any missions after that. Well, actually, she started taking lighter missions after she underwent her period of bereavement, but even that proved too much for her. Mira used to be a sharp-tongued bitchy person back in the day, you know, part of the reason of why she was known as the demon of fairy tale, but it seemed like she tried to cope with the loss by becoming a bit more like Lisanna. She became the Mira that you met when you walked through the doors after I saved you at the port, and she never fought again. I'd like to think they've finally moved on since they are both fighting on the front lines again. Myra's taking missions every now and then. I noticed an Elfman has full control over his beast form. However, things were still harsh. They'll never truly get over it, I think. I mean, it's been so long for me since Igneal left, and I'm still trying to find that scaly bastard. I lost my mother. She died from disease, but I never witnessed her passing. Lucy muttered. Elfman, despite him not being in control, it was like he literally dealt the killing blow himself. And you said Mira saw it all happen? I could never fathom such a traumatic experience. Natsu remained silent for a moment, watching as Happy reached into his neckerchief and rested down the bouquet of flowers he had been carrying. She liked lilies. They were her favorite, the winged feline stated. Happy then summoned his wings and hovered next to Lucy, both of them watching Natsu rise back to his feet. The Dragonslayer dusted himself off before showing off his trademark grin. Alright, well, time to head back to the guild. I totally want to be there when Urza tells Ji-chan that she's the Fujin's sister. He laughed before walking off towards the forest. Lucy couldn't help but laugh at her friend's excitement, but paused when she caught Happy's gaze. Happy, something wrong? Nothing, just… Happy gave the blonde a small smile. You're a good person, Lucy. Oh, thanks Happy. Aye sir. Happy waved a paw happily as he took to a higher altitude. Still kinda heavy to carry around, but a good person nonetheless. I'll murder you, cat. Insert music. Fate Stay Night UBW 2015 Ren, Remembrance. Hospital, Magnolia Town, Fury. So for how long have you known about your heritage? Ren asked. I've known for a few months now, but it was a lot to take in, you know? Urza replied. I mean, I always thought I had been an orphan with no family. Fairy tale, family, but it's not the same thing as having actually blood relatives. Rin nodded her head before getting up from her chair and knelt down in front of the red-haired mage. The brown-haired doctor cupped Urza's face in her hands before a smile graced her features, tears collecting at the edges of her eyes. You really are your mother's child. Rin pulled Urza into a tight hug and Urza immediately returned it. The older woman's tears flowed without restraints and Urza rubbed the doctor's back as she shook from the unbridled emotion. You were such a beautiful baby and you grew up so splendidly. When I saw you, you reminded of your mother, Kushina-sama. To be able to see you grow up. To be able to see your parents teach you and your brother to be mages. To see your first battles. To help heal you back up from all the bruises and broken bones you would have had to endure. You always thought I was going to be a mage? You're your parents' child. If you didn't become a fighter, then I would swear you were adopted. The two women laughed at the joke before Rin pulled back from the hug, her smile still present on her face. You were my goddaughter. I helped Tsunade-sama and Shizune birth you. I was there when Kushina-sama and Minato-sensei gave you your name. You gave me my name from what I was shown. Rin's eyes widened. You know about that? I know a lot of things, Rin-san. Urza smiled softly. Naruto showed me. Naruto? Rin's eyes widened even further, but then a look of realization came upon her face. Back then, after everything that happened before and after the Fantasia Festival, you had me run a DNA test between you and someone with a strand of blonde hair. Rin's hands flew up to cover her mouth as tears once again traced their way down her face. So that means… Urza nodded. Oni-sama is alive as well, but unfortunately, Okawa-sama and Odo-sama were not able to share his fate. Minato-sensei and Kushina-sama. A deep frown appeared on the doctor's face. And if you're alive… I remember Makarov telling me about your past when we gave you your first psych eval after you came in. When you told me what you went through, it was horrific. Being a slave for all those years. Tell me, since Kakashi and Obito were with you when the lizardmen attacked, did they? Urza shook her head. The mages who captured us as slaves, they killed Obito Ni-san and Kakashi Ni-san. Oh by the dragons. Rin sobbed into her hands. So everyone, they're all of them are gone. It was more of a statement than a question and Urza could only nod her head. For 10 years, even though I knew the chances were slim, I always wondered if any of you were alive. Even when I was going through my medical training with poor Lyuzuka-sensei after she took me in, I held on to that hope, but a person could only remain steadfast in their beliefs for so long. I understand your feelings, Rin-san. The daughter of 2 wizard saints said as she rested an armored hand on top of Rin's. I'm sure Oni-sama would have liked to tell you about this as well. Speaking of which, where is Naruto? What is he up to? How is he doing? Rin asked a series of rapid-fire questions, making Urza sweat drop as she couldn't help but think of Rin as acting like a doting parent. Of course, given the information she just received and the relationship she had with her parents, it was an understandable reaction. Oni-sama is fine. If you were to see him now, he really is the mirror image of Oto-sama. Since the day he was born he showed he had gotten Minato-sensei's genetics, thought he does have Kushina-sama's face. Rin smiled as she remembered her first time seeing the newborn Naruto. As for what he's up to, well, he's a mage just like our parents as well as myself. He's doing very well for himself, but he has his own. She paused to consider her wording. He is very free-spirited, so I can't really picture him as someone who would settle down in one place. As for what he's up to, well, let's just say Oni-sama has his hands full as an independent mage. Rin laughed lightly. He sounds a lot like Kushina-sama in that regard then. Well, if you ever get into contact with Naruto, tell him to come and give me a visit. I would very much like to see how he turned out. The image of her brother fighting like a possessed maniac appeared in her mind, and the brown-eyed Requib mage chuckled nervously. Yeah, I'll be sure to do that. A moment of silence passed between the 2 women. Rin then raised an eyebrow as she noticed the slight fidgeting of her patient. Something you want to ask, Urza-chan? I just wanted to know. I know you said you gave up on believing that my parents, Oni-sama and I were alive after a number of years of holding onto a seemingly false hope, but did you ever have any sort of suspicions at all that I could have been their daughter back from the dead? Of course I did. Rin replied curtly as she gestured to the armored redhead. You are practically the spitting image of Kushina-sama, and you have the brown eyes that I knew you inherited from your mother's bloodline. The ones that I remembered so vividly from when you were a baby. You know, Naruto practically named you after I made the suggestion to turn your name from the masculine Ezra into the significantly more feminine Urza. Though, I do wish your femininity would actually be reflected in your actual personality, you Amazon-like swordswoman. The Titania of Fairy Tail laughed lightly in response. But it was a simple fantasy at the time. I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, and I swore for those few seconds after I first met you, that as I watched you grow up over the past few years since you joined Fairy Tail, that the similarities between you and Kushina-sama were simply uncanny. I saw them as purely coincidental, but I did have a little itch in the back of my mind that maybe, just maybe, things weren't a coincidence. That your resemblance to Kushina-sama was something worth looking into. But with them dead, you couldn't believe in the possibility of me or Oni-sama ever being alive either. Urza finished the doctor's sentence for her. Rin nodded her head before smiling once more at the S-class mage. It really is a blessing to hear about all of this from you, Urza-chan. Knowing that the legacy of not just Konohagakure, but the legacy of Kushina-sama and Minato-sensei still exists is nothing short of miraculous. Even if you think you don't deserve it, I just want to thank you, Urza-chan. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. Urza smiled and nodded to the brown-haired doctor. But Urza gained a confused expression as she noted the serious expression that suddenly appeared on poor Lyuzuka's student's face. Tell me, Urza-chan. The medical mage reached out and held the swordswoman's hand tightly in her grasp. Why did you choose to tell me this? You were Okawa-sama's and Oto-sama's friend. I felt you had a right to know the truth more than anyone else. I see. Rin developed a thoughtful expression. But Urza-chan, Minato-sensei and Kushina-sama were the most powerful humans on the planet before they died. You do know what having a reputation as infamous as theirs would entail, correct? If you mean having earned enemies and things along those lines, then yes, I am aware. However, I think I am capable of handling myself quite well, Rina-san. I won't doubt your strength as a mage, Urza-chan. You're an S-class mage of the strongest guild in Fury after all. However, should this sort of information become commonplace, if people, dark mages especially, become aware that the children of Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze are alive, then it paints a target on not just your back, but on your entire guild. There is word going around every now and then the heart attack in Clover Town was a targeted attack and not just Grimoire heart flexing their muscles. They may be an evil guild, but dark guilds of their status don't make unnecessary movements out in broad daylight the way they did. If anyone else knows. Urza guessed. A simple nod of confirmation was her answer. Only Natsu, Happy, Gray and Lucy know. They are my closest friends in the guild and I trust them with my life. They understand the ramifications behind this sort of information and know that it is my story to tell, not theirs. And do you plan to tell this to anyone? Ren asked. I do plan to tell Master. Mary Jane is also someone I am considering to tell, as she is Master's confidant and someone who has practically ran the guild whenever he is absent. Gildarts is trustworthy and would be able to keep the information under wraps, and he is a fellow S-class mage. Urza explained. Other than those three, I don't plan on telling anyone else. Rin got up from her chair and walked towards the window, looking out over Magnolia Town and the people that walked streets below her. I am not saying this out of pure speculation, but because it is an eventuality. What do you mean, Rin-san? Eventually the story is going to be told one day. It will start out as a rumor. That rumor will stretch across the town and I will reach neighboring towns. Then it will reach across the entire kingdom. It will spread from across the land and across the seas. It will spread until all of Ishgar will become aware of who you really are. Urza Scarlet, a name known far and wide as the S-class mage and Titania of fairy tale, is no longer who she says she is. She is Urza Uzumaki Namikaze. You believe that if the world finds out who I really am that they will reject me, out of fear. Your family name holds a great amount of power and instills an even greater amount of fear in people not just in Fury, but across the continent of Ishgar. As wizard saints, your parents acted in the capacity that was required of them. They fought in wars alongside Master Makarov and the other 10 wizard saints and thus they have garnered many an enemy. The tattoo-faced doctor explained. I can't control you and tell you what to do. You are a grown woman who has enough intelligence and strength to make her own decisions. Who you choose to tell about your heritage is your choice and yours alone. But as someone who has dabbled in handling the repercussions of revealing sensitive information to others, I advise you to keep the circle as small as you can for now. I understand, Rin-san. Urza got up from her seat and gave a small bow of her head. Thank you. I will take your words to heart. You know, when you told me about Naruto, he sounds so much like your mother, but you... She walked up to Urza and patted her on the head. The way you think and speak, it reminds me so much of your father. The redhead blushed lightly and Rin couldn't help but laugh at how adorable a flustered Urza looked. Now get out of here, kiddo. Rin gave a quick hug to the younger female before she spun Urza around and pushed her towards the door. You obviously have one hell of a bomb to drop on your guild master's lap. Rin-san. Good luck. Urza was then roughly shoved outside and the door closed right behind her. Temporary Magic Council HQ, Clover Town, Fury. Man, this is so troublesome. Shikamaru sighed, rubbing his neck. Why do we have to be the ones to look after the rookie knights? Because we're the next in line to take over our father's jobs when they retire, Ino replied as she flicked her friend's ear. The shadow magic user scowled at the platinum blonde rune knight, holding his reddening ear. Oh come on, Shika. Choji spoke up as he ate a few more chips from the bag he had in his hands. Sure they're new recruits, but they aren't going to be that bad. I mean, were we that spectacular when we joined the corp? Well, no, the black-haired genius replied. But wouldn't it be, I don't know, the head captain's job to oversee the rookies? Shika, you know head captain Lahar has his hands full with everything that's happened since the heart attack. Ino said. He has to manage the entirety of the corp, not just the rookies. He has to sort through all the criminal reports that we all bring him, on a daily basis mind you. And then there is the necessary paperwork so that the wizard saints can legally take the mantle of being the new magic council since everyone else is dead after. The mind manipulation magic user became silent as she and her best friends frowned. They remembered watching the horrendous scene through the Lacrima vision channels. The amount of fire and destruction that Kurama produced was unfathomable, showing off just how he had earned his moniker as the Onibi Mayobu. Do you think Kurama did all that on purpose? Choji asked. Choji, Ino's sky blue eyes looked at her brown-haired friend in shock. You know Kurama would never do something like that. Sure, we didn't know that he and Naruto were who they were. Her voice grew softer, her expression becoming downcast. But he and Naruto, they were so angry. They were so hurt when they saw the state Clovertown ended up in, the state that Ayame ended up in. I don't think someone who reacts the way they did could have done the things that happened in Era. There has to be an explanation for all of this. Ino has a point. Shikamaru nodded to his platinum blonde friend. Those two took off the moment they handed Ayame to us. Whatever it was that happened that made them into what they are, whatever happened that made Kurama attack Era, we need answers. But how are we supposed to get them? The brown-haired Titan magic user squinted his eyes and thought. It's been weeks since the attack on Era and Heaven's Fall. What are the chances of us running into Naruto and Kurama? The sound of approaching footsteps distracted the second-generation Ino Shikacho trio as they turned away from each other and looked forwards to see the topic of their discussion heading towards them. His face mask had been pulled down and his hooded cloak was no longer worn over the rest of his dark-colored clothing. The golden flame necklace he had received from Sakura's mother was once more worn securely around his neck, the piece of jewelry jumping slightly with each step he took. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze came to a halt, Kurama watching from his perch atop his partner's head. The four were silent as looks of surprise from the Rune Knights were met with a mild frown. And Naruto? Ino asked, her eyes blinking rapidly to make sure that what she was seeing wasn't any sort of illusion. What are you doing here? Shikamaru asked. We're here to talk. What you saw and what we did that day Grimoire heart attack is no dream nor an illusion. We are who we are and I'm sure you all have many questions. Many doesn't even begin to quantify how much we want to ask you, Choji commented. I understand that, Choji, but before we go to talk, we just want to do one thing. The hardened look in his sapphire orbs suddenly dropped. The Rune Knight trio could only watch as the SS-class mage suddenly looked so very tired and his once strong and proud stance was slightly hunched over as if he suddenly received a massive weight upon his shoulders. Take me to her. Let me see a Yame-ne-chan. Insert music. Fate Stay Night UBW 2015 Ocean of Memories. Medical Wing, Temporary Magic Council HQ, Clover Town, Fury. The monotonous beeping of the heart monitor and her quiet breathing were the only sounds Naruto and Kurama focused on in that moment. The sagging of his shoulders wasn't as depressed as it had been moments ago. The sight of his sister figure being alive served to be the cause of that. The blonde Dragonslayer reached down towards his sister figure's sleeping form and tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. Has she woken up at all since the heart attack? Naruto asked as he turned to his pink-haired friend. Sakura, after having recovered from her own injuries and trauma after the attack on Clover Town, had taken it upon herself to aid the medical staff in taking care of the numerous amounts of wounded that were still in the care of the Magic Council and the Rune Knight Corp. Her efforts were very much appreciated. Numbered the amount of medics that were on hand. The piece of wood had impaled her through her large intestine, so she needed surgery to suture the wound close and replenish the blood she had lost. She had remained unconscious for approximately 3 days after the surgery before she finally woke up. We've been keeping her on morphine for the pain and diazepam to help her sleep. Diazepam? Kurama mused. She's been having nightmares? Yeah, it's to be expected and I don't blame her though. Sakura frowned. Post-traumatic stress disorder is bound to affect all of us in Clover Town. Speaking of which, Sakura. Naruto moved to stand directly in front of the green-eyed woman. Said green eyes met his blue ones with confusion and then surprise as she was suddenly pulled into a hug. Naruto. I'm sorry for your loss. Sakura's eyes widened before she seemed to melt into Naruto's embrace, her eyes shutting tightly as she fought in vain to hold back the flood of emotions that suddenly flowed through her. I loved Seiko Oba-san as if she were my own mother. Kurama and I. We tried to get back to Clover as fast as we could. We couldn't make it in time. I'm sorry. The pink-haired medic in training could only nod her head as she reciprocated her friend's embrace, though her grip was noticeably tighter. After a few moments, the two separated and Sakura offered the blue-eyed mage a smile of thanks as she wiped her eyes free of the wetness from her tears. You've done a great job taking care of all these patients, Sakura. Kurama gave the girl a fanged smile. You know, for a violent girl, you really do have the healing touch. You'll make a great doctor when all is said and done. Thanks, Kurama. She returned the fox-costumed feline smile with one of her own. Now, Ino told me that you two wanted to tell us all something. I pretty much finished doing the ward rounds so we can head back to the room that I'm sharing with Ino, Shika and Choji, and we can talk there. Sounds good. Naruto and Kurama gave a look to the sleeping form of Ayame. With what they were about to tell Sakura about was bound to result in a very loud reaction, so taking that in mind, they agreed to shift venues. Rune Knight Bunkers, Temporary Magic Council HQ, Clover Town, Fury. The bunkers were not as much bunkers as they seemed more like apartment flats. They were equipped with 3 separate bedrooms since most Rune Knights were made into squads of 3 during their rookie enrollments. Due to the leeway that their parents had, Ino, Shikamaru and Choji were able to room with each other. The room was also equipped with a small kitchenette with built-in appliances like a dishwasher, refrigerator and freezer. There were 1.5 bathrooms and their living room area was composed of long couch that could fit 3 people and a single recliner that were faced towards a flat-screen monitor of their Lacrima Vision to be used for their entertainment. The couch was now equipped with a bed pillow and a folded-up blanket which were for Sakura's own use since the living room area had now been converted into a pseudo-bedroom until Clover Town's repairs were completed. Ino had offered to have Sakura take her room while she would be the one to take the couch, but the pink-haired girl's stubbornness proved legendary as she denied any and all offers made by her best friend. In the words of Shikamaru, it was troublesome. Here you go. Sakura rested a cup of tea down for all the humans in the room, while Kurama was gifted with a bottle of fire whiskey. You do care. Kurama held a paw to his heart, making mock sniffling sounds and sobs. Shut up and drink your damn whiskey, mangy cat. Sakura rolled her eyes at the crimson-eyed cat, but her smirk of amusement could not be repressed as she watched Kurama guzzle down the liquid like a baby would a bottle of breast milk. She then took her seat at the small kitchen table they were all gathered around, watching with curiosity and amazement as Naruto made a few hand motions in the air. Purple magic seals suddenly decorated the 4 walls, ceiling and the floor before they faded out of existence. Silencing seals. Naruto informed his friends, though his eye contact was directed at Sakura. Why are you looking at me when you say that? Sakura's eyes narrowed in annoyance. Because. Kurama took a deep breath as he mentally prepared himself for what was to come. Naruto and I. We are the Ogono Fujin and the Onibi Myobu. Of course, as of this point, I also go by the name of Kyubi. There was a moment of silence as Naruto and Kurama watched their female friend's eyes grow wider as her brain finally registered their words. 3, 2, 1. They counted down in their minds before covering their ears. WHAT? Sakura rose up from her seat so fast that the chair skidded backwards and fell over with a resounding bang. The Ino Shika Cho trio really hoped Naruto's silencing seal was effective because the physician in training was not dropping in volume anytime soon. What do you mean by that? How can you be two criminals? Those two are SS-class criminals with the notice to flee on sight and are possibly the most dangerous pair of magic users to ever walk the face of Earthland. How the hell can you even make such a claim? Are you too insane? Are you too fucking stupid? Sakura, calm down. No, I will not fucking calm down, Ino, Sakura roared. The Ogono Fujin and Onibi Myobo, they're killers. They kill people in Naruto and Kurama. They can't, they aren't, they could never be. The room fell into silence once more as Kurama hopped off of Naruto's head and the blonde rose to his feet. In a flash of magic energy, Naruto had brought out his cloak and pulled up his face mask while Kurama had transformed into his three-tailed form. Sakura's eyes were wide, her legs literally shaking. She would have fallen onto the floor, but Ino quickly went to her side and helped to slowly bring her down into her chair that Choji had gone to retrieve. Sakura gulped as she tried to calm herself down, though it was an effort in futility as she was breathing rather quickly to the point of almost hyperventilating. Why you're the… She raised a shaky finger that was directed at Naruto. Naruto nodded. And you're the… Kurama nodded as well. When? How? Why wouldn't you tell us something like this? Insert music. Naruto's sadness and sorrow. Honestly, if it were up to us, we never would have told you about who we were to begin with. Naruto stated as he pulled his face mask back down. You four, Ayame Ne-chan. You are all good people and my best friends. To tell you all that this is who we are, that we are SS-class criminals is not something I believed you should have been burdened with knowing. We would have continued to play the parts of your childhood friends, Naruto the indifferent idiot and Kurama, the talking cat who could fly. Kurama said with a frown before looking out the window in the direction where Clover Town was situated. You two are so selfish, Sakura exclaimed. How could you do this to us? You've been lying to us how you are for so many years? How could you do this? We're your friends? Because we didn't want to lose you. Naruto admitted as he gave the green-eyed woman a sheepish grin. You are all the closest people to us. To tell you who we really are, it comes down to if you would believe us and whether or not you would still want to remain close to us when it was all said and done. We didn't want to face that sort of situation with you four and so, we kept it in the dark. But looking at it from a realistic perspective, like Naruto said, you are the ones that we see as closest to us. People that we could even see as surrogate family. Kurama stated. Eventually, there was going to be a day that you all would have discovered who we were and if you all did, Shikamaru would have been the one to do so. You probably had your suspicions during that time when I had my mental episode at Sakura's birthday party. Yue the wind bent when you got angry. Shikamaru looked at Naruto with a frown. I didn't want to believe it. You're one of my best friends, Naruto. I didn't sleep for a while because I was so confused. I didn't know who you were or what you were doing, and knowing that, how could I ever make the judgment that you were the Ogono Fujin? Let alone the son of Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki. Weren't those the two strongest wizard saints to ever exist? Sakura asked. Yes. Naruto nodded. I am their son, however, they are dead, killed in the field of battle 20 years ago when I was a baby. But if you were a baby, how would you know that they died in battle? How would you know that they were actually dead at all? Choji asked. Naruto sighed, running a hand through his golden locks before turning to Kurama. We've come this far. You said we would tell them everything and well, that would be a part of everything. Naruto sighed once more, cursing at the logic in Kurama's words. The blonde then turned back to his childhood friends and raised up a hand, their eyes widening as a burst of magic energy cloaked the limb and took on the image of a massive black and blue claws. The reason I know my parents died in battle is because I was raised by the very thing that killed them. Naruto explained. They were killed by a dragon and I was raised by that same dragon. So, that means that you're a… Ino's eyes widened, but she couldn't find her voice as her mind began to feel as if it were about to shut down. I am a Dragonslayer. Sakura swallowed the lump that formed in her throat. So, when you left town and you said you lived in the mountains with your adoptive father. Naruto nodded. Tousand is a dragon. You knew that he killed your parents and yet you still lived with him? You let that monster raise you and you still call him Tousand? Shikamaru exclaimed. How could you even begin to come to terms with knowing that the thing that you grew up with is the reason you have no parents, why you have no family? He saw my potential and I was already instilled with the ideology to be strong was one of the most important things in life. Naruto replied as he continued to let the black and blue aura dance around his arm. I learned about the fate of my parents and I cried. I cried so much my throat hurt. I took out a lot of anger on Tousand, But while he did leave me without biological parents, I never would have been as strong as I am now. He raised me, trained me, taught me about the ways of the world and everything in it. A smirk of amusement came across Naruto's face. I was a child then, but as an adult I can appreciate the fact that Toussaint didn't leave me for dead and instead raised me as his own son. I owe everything to that overgrown garden snake. But, when I was 6 years old, Toussaint was the one who had me venture to Clover Town to learn about human interaction. Even though he hated humans and humanity itself, he still had me go there. Naruto chuckled. In a way, Toussaint was the reason I even met you all in the first place. So yes, he took away my parents, but he indirectly gave me my friends. So, how did you two even become the Ogo no Fujin and Onibi Myobo? Sakura asked. We had been traveling for a while and arrived in Tully village where a dark guild called Black Knight had been kidnapping people and selling them as slaves on the black market. Kurama answered. We went out of our way to save those that were kidnapped, and after we did, we earned our monikers. However, the villagers had done it more out of praise and thanks for saving their friends and family. And by saving the villagers, we killed them. The blunt admission from the son of Acknowledgia made their eyes widen. I used my futon and Kurama burned them. The Magic Council's law against mages killing other mages, even if they are Dark Guild members, was what had us labeled as criminals in the first place. Because of that, we were hunted down by the council and even targeted for recruitment by some Dark Guilds along the way. You put head Captain Han out of commission for several months, Naruto, Choji said with a bit of venom in his tone. Watch your tongue, Choji. That accusatory tone will not be taken lightly if you continue to think what you are thinking right now. Naruto snarled. Choji remained quiet, but Naruto continued to talk. The Magic Council came after me first, Choji. Do not make the mistake that I would actively go out of my way to fight someone who is not worth my time. I was also sent to be assassinated by 2 members of the 7 kin of Purgatory in Grimoire Heart, a fire godslayer and a user of wood magic. Kurama and I fought to defend ourselves, and if the ones who faced us were to die in the process, then so be it. They made their decisions and so did we. Naruto. You? Ino looked at her fellow blonde in shock. How can you say that with such conviction? This is killing, taking people's lives away. Not everything I learned about the world is good-natured, Ino. Naruto clenched his fist and allowed his Dragonslayer magic to dissipate. The world is dark and full terrors, and if you are not willing to do what needs to be done for your own survival, then you are living in a fantasy. You were always pessimistic, Shikamaru commented. I prefer the term realistic, the blonde interjected. But, why? Choji asked. You could have done so much with your power. You could have joined a legal guild, maybe even the Rune Knights, and do some good in the world. We don't like being tied down. Kurama was the one to reply this time. I can't remember if we've told you this before, but if we haven't, then you should know that Naruto and I are not ones to be bound by the legality of the Magic Council systems. The things we've accomplished and done have all been possible because we are not bound by laws. We follow our own code of conduct and morality, and it's been working out pretty well for us. Sakura raised her hands to her chest and held onto the collar of her shirt tightly. Who are you? Naruto and Kurama turned to Sakura so quickly they may have been able to get whiplash. Sakura. I don't even recognize you two. Tears lined her eyes. You two were always so. You were great friends to me. Now here you are, telling us that you're actually criminals, that you've killed people. Do you even care that you may have hurt people around you doing what you've done? Initially, we did not. Naruto admitted with a downcast look. My dragon parent taught me that it was always best to serve my own interests, and I've always followed that doctrine to the letter. It is hypocritical to want to do my own thing and follow the words of another, but everything has to have a basis. Heroes follow the basis of heroism from seeing knights and mages in action. However, what can be considered as good and evil is often very subjective. What are you talking about? The Ino Shikacho trio asked. The Rune Knights have been involved in many wars over the course of many generations. The world took many years to reach the level of peace that it currently has, and what can be conceived as heroism from the perspective of fury may be seen as villainous from the other side. In our case, our attack on the Black Knight Guild was seen as heroic from the villagers of Tully, and yet the Magic Council sees it as something evil and is what labeled Kurama and I as criminals in the first place. The only reason we were made SS class and flee on sight was after our fight with Han, Kakuo and the 2 Grimoire Heart members, as they saw us as far too dangerous to be fought against. But all of your actions have had consequences, Naruto. The shadow magic user stated coldly. That's the reason why laws were made. To ensure things would be kept in order. We were labeled as evil for not following these so-called laws and straying from the line of order. However, all we really do is just act within our own interests. Kurama added before his crimson eyes glowed. But Shikamaru, in our own interests has done. When the lullaby flute was taken by Esienwald, it was Naruto and I who killed them and prevented them from using it on the town. When the guild war between Fairy Tail and Phantom Lord occurred, it was Naruto who killed Jose Porla and ended it. When your Light Guild alliance was made and they went out to try and defeat them, in the end, It was Naruto and I who killed their strongest members, and I was the one who destroyed Nirvana. We were the ones who took out a major player in the Ballum Alliance. And who got affected in the process? Kurama, Choji countered. No one of our concern. The dark tone in Naruto's voice made a shiver go down everyone's spines. The people who died are a consequence of them getting in our way. Then, what happened back home? Back in Clover Town. Sakura did not break eye contact with the two as she uttered her next few words. Were those a consequence of people getting your way too? Naruto and Kurama's eyes widened, their mouths agape as they looked at the pink-haired doctor in training. Those few seconds stretched on for what seemed to be an eternity before Naruto's eyes took on a shine of white. The rage in his eyes burned with an intensity that made his friends recoil as if they had been slapped. How dare you make such an accusation? How dare you think that I would willingly put our home at risk? Naruto snapped. Seiko Oba-san, Tuichiji-chan, they were as much family to me as your own parents were. Listen carefully when I say this, Sakura. As I had admitted before, the things I've done and the things I've had to do, I did not give a damn about the consequences of what I had to do as long as it met my agenda. It was just myself and Kurama at that time, but as the years went by, I found more and more people who looked up to me. They turned to me for guidance and instruction. They are people that I have come to call my nakama, and if any of my actions at this point in time had resulted in the injury or death of the ones I love, the ones I call my nakama, then the dragons themselves would have had to smite me. If I knew that if any of the things I did were to cause this, I would never forgive myself, by the dragon Sakura, because it was as a result of my actions that I nearly lost Kurama. 4 pairs of eyes were wide as they watched the panting blonde as he had practically yelled out his entire rant. Why you nearly lost Kurama? Choji asked. What do you mean? Was Sakura's follow-up question. Grimoire heart attacked. Kurama stated. We let rage cloud our minds, but we were very clear that we didn't care. Grimoire heart was to die for what they did, and we sought to carry out that promise. No matter what, even if it meant revealing our true natures to Ino, Shikamaru and Choji. When you were in Clover Town the day of the attack, you said you had been passing through to visit and that's why you were suddenly there when everything happened. Shikamaru said. Is that really the reason you two happened to be in Clover? No, Kurama replied. Naruto and I developed a few connections over the past few months. Our connections are who informed us about seeing Grimoire Heart's airship and that they were attacking Clover Town. We flew back as quickly as we could, but by the time we got there, the pair gritted their teeth as they recalled seeing the town that they had called home as a pile of ruin and rubble. You wanted to protect Clover Town? Ino asked. If we were there before Grimoire Heart, if we had arrived even 1 second before the attack, we would have done everything in our power to defend that town. No matter how far we travel across the continent, Clover Town is one place that I see as a constant. It's practically where everything started for us. Kurama replied. His tone was as serious as it could ever be. I met a Yamane-chan and Kurama in that town. I met you all in that town. I was practically raised in that town. Blood, sweat and tears would be shed if it meant that I could have prevented the attack on Clover Town. Naruto's fists were clenched tightly and his teeth gritted. Then what happened in Era? Choji asked. In Era? Sakura's eyes narrowed in thought before the expression of an epiphany came upon her face. The Kyuubi attack. That's right. Kurama. You attacked the Magic Council's main headquarters. Not only that, but you attacked the surrounding area as well. You burned everything. Kurama and Naruto visibly flinched at Sakura's words and their gazes seemed to darken. Choji took notice of it, just like the others, but he continued to press the topic. We saw what happened. Kurama, you transformed and you laid waste to the entire capital of the continent. Innocent lives were lost because of you. Ino, Shika and I. We believe that something else was at play. If what you say is true, and if what Ino believes about you, that if you were to have flown back to Clover and reacted the way you had to enact vengeance for it, then what was it about Era that made you go so berserk? What happened that made you the Kyuubi? Kurama gritted his teeth, a bestial growl bubbling within his throat. There was a great deal of rage present, but his downcast expression told volumes of the shame he was currently feeling. It was not soon after Naruto and I rushed off to attack the Grimoire Heart airship. Kurama began. We blew it up. We thought we had gotten our vengeance for what they had done to Clover Town, but Ultir Milkovich was present on the airship it seemed. Who's that? Sakura asked. She was a former member of the Magic Council with Jelal Fernandez. They had worked together to recreate what was known as the Tower of Heaven and the R system, an ancient and forbidden magic. They would have used it to resurrect the Black Mage, Zareth. Shikamaru explained. The Magic Council acted, but because they had decided to use Etherion on the tower, they had only served to further Jalal's plans. If Fairy Tail hadn't been present at the time to destroy the tower, then there's no telling what would have happened. Is that why the original Magic Council disbanded? Sakura asked. I remember Ino had mentioned it to me during one of her time-off periods. Yeah, Shikamaru turned and made a pointed glare at the blue-eyed girl. That was classified information. Ino shrugged sheepishly before clearing throat and continuing the explanation for Sakura. Anyway, so Ultir used a form of magic known as Arc of Time, which is essentially time manipulation. She had caused a great deal of damage to the Magic Council HQ by accelerating time and causing the building to age and fall apart. After that, they had to rebuild it and we passed it off as a Rune Knight training exercise that went awry. Ultir was then made into an S-class criminal due to the secrets she held as being a former member of the Magic Council and a user of ancient magic. Though, to think she was a part of Grimoire Heart. Choji munched on a few chips as he left his sentence hanging. So, then she reversed time when you blew up the airship then? Sakura asked as she turned her focus back to Kurama. That's right. The Kitsune nodded. Naruto took the lead to board the airship and I would have gone after him, but I was held back by some unexpected visitors, Tartaros. Wait a minute, the Magic Council told us about them since Grimoire Heart were the ones who attacked Clover. They're part of a group called the Balam Alliance, right? So they are allies with Grimoire Heart, right? Among dark guilds, allies are more akin to tools, Kurama stated. We don't know why they were there when the heart attack happened, but they had been present for the sole purpose of capturing me. You? The 3 Rune Knights and Sakura asked. So you've met Tartaros? You know who they are? Shikamaru asked. Kurama shook his head. Not much. When they captured me, they had used teleportation magic to take me to their base after which I had fallen unconscious. When I came to, I was in an underground prison cell that was fashioned specifically to hold have in their ranks named Gaia. Oranos is another one of their members and he uses sky magic, utilizing the elements of water, wind and lightning. Both he and Gaia would torture me for their master. If I didn't have a healing factor I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be alive. A sharp gasp came from both Sakura and Ino. Torture? I could tell you what they did to me, but I don't think you guys could stomach the imagery. The pyrokinetic fox said before turning to Shikamaru. You care, I know you do. But I've known you long enough to know that analytic look in your eyes. I'm sorry, but that's about as much as I know about Tartaros. I can't say where they are, and while I do know that Gaia and Oranos are powerful members in their ranks, I do not know the identity of their master. I will admit to say that I saw him, but I'm pretty sure no one knows who he is. I've never seen that face before in my life and I'm sure no one ever has. Shikamaru sighed, rubbing his temples and mumbled, well there goes that option. The shadow magic user then focused back on the part of his mind that was more emotional. Why did they torture you? They wanted to break me, Kurama snarled. The master of Tartaros saw me as a valuable weapon. But wouldn't have capturing Naruto sufficed as well? Choji asked. He didn't want a human weapon. He wanted a demon. The Kitsune growled at the memory of the gray-eyed dark mage. He wanted me as a pet and he did everything he could to try and make me become one. I never would have succumbed and they never would have broken me, but, Sakura asked. Kurama. What did they to you? Ino whispered gently as she placed a hand against the side of Kurama's face. Kurama sighed as he relished in the comfort that the Yamanaka mage's contact provided before he returned to the story. They did what they could, but all their torture methods could not make me bend to their will, so they looked to an external source and they brainwashed me with the Sharingan. The Sharingan? Shikamaru's eyes widened in shock. But the Uchiha clan was wiped out when Konohagakure no Sato was destroyed 20 years ago by the… Shikamaru paused and a look of realization and then anger came upon his face. The Lizard Man. That's right. They brought in a Lizard Man who is still alive after the fall of Konoha, the village that you all would have grown up in had the Lizard Man invasion not happened. The Kyuubi no Yoko clenched his forepaw into a tight fist out of anger. All it took was one look and I fell prey to the illusions that damn piece of pink eye. I had never felt so humiliated in my life, knowing that I was not in control of what I was saying or doing, but at the same time, still aware of what was happening around me. After that, Tartaros took me to Era and let me loose as a weapon of mass destruction. Whether it was to make a statement or if they had a plan to accomplish my performing that act of terrorism, I cannot say, but none of what happened was of my own volition. I would have probably remained the pet of that guild too, but Naruto and my siblings intervened and I was rescued. And it is because of that I will not let Grimoire Heart nor Tartaros have their actions being left unpunished. The 4 Clovertown natives looked at the blonde Dragonslayer in confusion. I am currently in the process of looking for them. Grimoire Heart captured and tortured me just like Tartaros had done to Kurama. They wanted to make an example of me in front of the Magic Council because they know who I am. They know I am the son of the 2 wizard saints who were regarded as the most powerful humans in existence. Naruto's blue eyes were bathed within white ethereal light once more. They turned my home to rubble. They killed Seiko Oba-san and Tuichiji-chan. They hurt Ayame Ne-chan. Trust me, when I find them, they will not escape my wrath. Insert music. Naruto Shippuden decision. Are you going to kill them? Sakura bit her lip as Naruto's glowing eyes met her emerald-colored ones. Yes. Naruto. A storm of retorts came from the mouths of the Clovertown natives. Rejections against his words and ideals met his ears and his body shook with restrained rage. His fists tightened, his teeth ground against each other and his eyes glowed even brighter until he could not withhold it any longer. "No, enough," the blonde fired back. "You may not agree with my methods, but people like them do not deserve to live. They took more lives than I ever have. I will not give them the satisfaction of being able to continue breathing. Naruto, this isn't the right way. The reason we have the law, the reason killing criminals isn't a legal act is because if mages were given the liberty to do so, then normal people who aren't mages, a whole 90% of Fiore's population would be left at the mercy of people with superpowers." Choji jumped in this time. "We need to show that the system works and your actions have not been helping with that. People heard of how Oracion Siete was killed when we sent in the Light Guild Alliance and they took it in stride. The public opinion is leaning towards killing by mage guilds to be an acceptable outcome and it's not something our society needs. What the people of the kingdom think is not of our concern," Naruto said as he rose up from his seat. Kurama reverted back to his Exceed form and took his seat atop Naruto's head as the blonde headed for the door. "You think that what you're doing is good? That what you're doing is heroic? Well, it's not." Naruto's body shook as he and Kurama released snorts of amusement at Ino's words, but they couldn't hold it in for very long as he began to laugh out loud. "Heroics? You think we do what do for glory and wanting to be seen as heroes? Ha 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 ha." Kurama couldn't continue as he fought to stop laughing. "We don't care if it was meant to be heroic or not." Naruto's tone of amusement immediately shifted to one of anger as he directed a harsh glare at the Rune Knight trio. "We are not heroes. We do not want to be heroes and we will never be heroes. All that matters to us is that Grimoire Heart and Tartaros pay for what they've done 100 times over. Vengeance is all that matters." The silencing seal was undone and he moved to open the door, but he only managed to open it halfway as Sakura rose up from her own chair and ran towards the duo. The pink-haired woman paused a few feet away from their location though as she froze from the intensity of their gazes when they met her own. She gulped down the lump in her throat. Why you don't have to go this far. I understand that you're angry and you're hurting, and we all are. But you don't have to stain your hands with so much blood anymore." Sakura offered the Dragonslayer and Exceed a shaky smile. "See, can't we just go back to the same things like how it was back when you visited Clovertown for my birthday? Can't we just go back to the way things were when we were kids? I'm not doing this just for my own sense of fulfillment, Sakura. I'm doing this for you all." "For us?" the pink-haired woman questioned, her eyes widening along with the Rune Knight trio behind her. "But why? Why would you go so far for us?" Naruto's gaze softened as the wind began to pick up as he walked outside of the door. "Because I'm your friend." Those were the last words they heard before Naruto vanished into the wind. Akane Beach, Fury. 2 months had passed and the period of the summer season was at its climax. The month of August was bright and hot, and so after a long period of hard work doing high-level missions and training, the members of Fairy Tail had been the illustrious opportunity by their guild master to have a brief vacation day at the very exclusive Akane Beach town. Akane was a popular tourist destination, known far and wide across the continent of Ishgar. Some of its patrons even journeyed as far as from the Penegrand Kingdom for the chance to take part in the town's festivities. With it being the peak of the summer time, business was booming. Though the Akane Beach town was comprised of numerous events and attractions to occupy their guests, there were 3 primary sections that caught the eyes of said guests. The first was the hotel. Though not as luxurious and tall as the Jade Tower in Crocus, the Akane Hotel was a close second for being one of Fiore's most popular pieces of architecture in the kingdom. Standing at a whopping 72 stories and housing 1608 rooms, the Akane Hotel catered to people of all creeds and races. The baseline setup for these rooms were catered to the preference of their patrons, but usually the rooms comprised of either a king-sized bed or 2 separate queen-sized beds, with 2 sets of armchairs, a couch, a flat-screen vision lacrima with a vast number of channels to browse through. The rooms were also en suite, of course. The rooms got more and more extravagant as one climbed higher and higher up the hotel, but while going up was an amazing venture in itself, everybody would only remain upstairs for a limited period of time as down in the basement area of the hotel was where the action took place. The casino aspect of the hotel was a classy establishment, and was so bright and colorful that one would think that it came straight out of an LSD-induced hallucination. However, in spite of the welcoming nature of the casino, you had to be well dressed to be a part of it, otherwise you were not allowed. As such, patrons went all out, from the way they styled their hair, to wearing their finest suits, dresses and jewelry. There was also no shortage of gambling games to take part in. Roulette, poker, blackjack, slot machines, hell, even the kid games like the crane game and air hockey were adjusted to make them into makeshift gambling games. The second attraction was the giant amusement park. The Ferris wheel was one of their most popular attractions due to it providing the perfect background landscape of a glittering blue ocean and white sands, which was taken advantage of during either the sunset or the night when the moon was high in order for romantic base to be made. Many a proposal and love confessions had occurred, but unfortunately the amusement park was not a miracle worker, as just as many hearts were broken within the confines of the ride. But what a better way to ease the pain of a broken heart than by pumping you full of endorphins and adrenaline. Roller coasters that went into dizzying corkscrews, 50-foot vertical drops, and a multitude of climbs and loop-de-loops were the highlight of the amusement park. Though for the high-speed ride challenge, there were always the carousels, tilt-a-whirls, bumper cars, a multitude of water slides that fed into the 200-foot-long and wide swimming pool, and enough strategically placed snack bars to feed the entire Rune Knight Corp. And then came the third and final attraction, the beach. White sands and glittering blue water that was so clear you could literally see your feet as you walked along the shallows. A few high-class restaurants were built along the edge of the beach to have foodgoers with a seaside view, and members of the Rune Knight Corp were paid to be the lifeguards on duty, as no expense was made if it meant the complete and utter satisfaction of the customers of Akane. The beach was held in such high regard that many modeling agencies and magazine publishers had to actually rent a time slot to use a quarantined area of beach that was strategically chosen as the backdrop for their centerfold pieces and swimsuit editions. It was the very definition of paradise. All love rivals will die. That paradise was found to be promptly ruined for Fairy Tail's celestial spirit mage. Her brown eyes were like those of a dead fish, blank and uncaring to the events around them. She stood still, her thoughts shifting to her current feeling of regret of coming to this place. Go to the Akane resort, they said. It will be fun, they said. She went, and for the first few hours of resting in her hotel room and lounging on her beach chair, Lucy would admit, it was indeed fun. With the sun shining brightly and the ocean's shallow areas of water being absolutely inviting, the girls of Fairy Tail decided on having a water fight. Unfortunately, no one had ever thought to consider the fact that one of their members was a seasoned hydrokinetic who could turn into water and had a psychotic competitive side when present in front of her self-proclaimed chosen mate. Juvia, I yield. Levy's cries were drowned out by the roaring of Juvia's body as she had transformed into a 20-foot-tall wave of salt water. Gajeel, help. The red-eyed Dragonslayer did not come to her rescue, unfortunately, as he was too busy indulging in a quick spar with Panther Lily. The clash of Gajeel's sword arm against Lily's bustermarm released loud clangs that blocked out the sounds of the blue-haired mage's distress. Juvia the wave came crashing down with unforgiving force. The other girls swirled through the raging tides generated by the daughter of Levia until they were finally swept ashore like pieces of driftwood. Lucy sighed as she lay on her back like a starfish. Why can't Gray just hurry up and have sex with this woman? You think that will solve the problem, Luce? Brown met black as the celestial spirit mage found the sunlight that bathed her soaking form to be blocked by the sun of Igniel. Well, given her personality, I don't think it will solve the problem, but it would sure as hell tone it down. Lucy replied. The amount of times I've almost drowned on dry land is far more than it should be. And what number should it be then? It should be Dragon Dance 0, you idiot. The pink-haired Dragonslayer laughed at his guildmate's exasperation before he held out a hand for her to grab. Natsu rolled his eyes as the blonde merely raised an arm limply into the air, making grabby motions with her hand. Lazy, however, he humored his female best friend, grabbing her by the wrist and pulled her to her feet with no effort whatsoever. She stuck her tongue out at him in retaliation like the mature mage that she was as she dusted the sand off of her back and backside. I do a lot of work cleaning up after your messes every time you and Happy barge into my apartment. Lucy gave her best friend a glare out of the corner of her eyes. I shouldn't have to be doing that much work. Oh, you know you love it when we visit. That's debatable. Natsu chuckled as the Kusarigama user pouted at him. The pink-haired Dragonslayer then diverted his gaze away from the blonde, scanning the sandy shores of Akane Resort. Lucy gained a quizzical on her face as she saw how he was turning his head every which way, her confusion only increasing as he saw his face brighten as he seemed to have found what he was looking for. In the current context, however, it was a poo. Urza. Natsu waved his arms wildly in the air as the red-haired mage walked towards them. She turned many a head and was very much unaware of the chaos her presence caused as some of those heads were greeted with slaps from their boyfriends and or girlfriends. People playing sports or swimming in the shallows had ended up pausing in their activities to watch her go by and could only imagine the things they would want to do to her. After all, who wouldn't want to stare at a black bikini-clad female with a figure that just wouldn't quit? However, the blue fairy tale symbol on her shoulder actually was, and thus she was uninhibited in her trek. The brown-eyed swordswoman gave a small wave and a smile to her guildmates before directing her gaze at the giddy Natsu. So are we gonna do this or what? Natsu asked, small embers flickering out from fingertips and toes. We haven't had a proper fight in ages. You know I never break a promise of my own volition, Natsu. Urza replied with her own look of battle lust. You've gotten so much stronger and catching those glimpses of what you could do during the fight in Edelus. I'm itching to see if you can finally keep up. Those sound like fighting words. The son of Igniel chuckled as flames finally burst forth, cloaking his fists without restraint. That's because they are. The Titania of Fairy Tail didn't miss a beat as she summoned forth her Flame Empress armor. With her orange-bladed sword in hand, the Titania of Fairy Tail shifted into a combat stance against the salamander. Hey, isn't that Urza Scarlet? Whoa, she's in her armor. She's going to fight that fire guy. Idiot. That's no fire guy, that's the salamander. You mean the Dragonslayer mage? What started out as quiet murmurs became loud bursts of excitement as the surrounding population began spreading the word within a matter of seconds. The not-so-public fight quickly became what the beachgoers expected to be as a crowd-pleasing form of entertainment. Alright. Combatants and crowd alike all turned their heads as when Kana Alberona walked around with a predatory expression on her face and a beer bottle in hand. Here's the deal. Any and all dealings involving Fairy Tail are handled by yours truly, the accountant of the establishment. Since when? The other members of Fairy Tail in the crowd thought. You wanna watch, you make a bet, the brown-haired beauty exclaimed. So ready your wallets. Would you choose our talents and voluptuous Titania? Or will you place your bets on the rowdy, fiery-tempered salamander? A period of silence fell across the crowd as they all blinked owlishly at Kana. You really think people are gonna buy into this? Lucy whispered to Levy. Gimme 1,000 on Titania. Levy gestured to the lovely young lady that started the betting pool and made her blonde friend sweat drop. Fury is full of idiots, the celestial spirit mage sighed. The people want what they want. Levy shrugged. And just like that, a ripple effect was generated across the entire crowd population as larger and larger bets were made. Understandably, due to her popularity and status as a mage, the bets made in favor of Urza were a lot more than those who aimed for Natsu to win. Such a predicament only served to further entice the blazing spirit of combat within Natsu's soul, and a literal aura of flame sprung to life around his body. The tension between the two high-level magic users was so great that it was practically palpable. Urza gripped her sword tightly as Natsu's flames licked the air with a hunger for battle that mimicked their user. The wind blew gently, ruffling the hair of the two combatants. However, the younger of the two fairy tale mages quickly began to lose his patience, and Urza smirked at that. I know you too well, Natsu. You will always charge headfirst into the fight, she thought. True to her thoughts, Natsu did end up losing his patience and struck first. The thing that caught the Titania off guard, however, was that Natsu didn't go for a headfirst charge as he usually did. Instead, he took a deep breath and went for the long-range approach. Fire and magic energy combined within his lungs before he breathed out a powerful stream of fire. The raging hot flames streaked across the sands with such an intensity that the granular substance turned orange due to being transformed into a state of molten glass. Long range. Urza commented as she prepared to use her sword. That's not like you, Natsu. You ain't seen nothing yet. His comment made the swordswoman raise an eyebrow in confusion, but she ignored it and went to cleave his flames apart with her Flame Empress sword. Once again, the S-class mage was brought into a state of bewilderment as the flames suddenly veered harshly to the side, and soon Urza found herself encased in a ring of fire. Behold, the ring of fire. Your creativity is sorely lacking, the daughter of two wizard saints commented. I may not have good naming sense, but I'm creative where it counts. The poor naming of your spells is probably from Roshi-san. Juvia commented from the sidelines as she recalled when the Lava Dragonslayer had given that unbelievably long spell title to the unison raid between Naruto and Natsu during the Jubi battle. Natsu's ears twitched as he caught wind of her words and turned to the blue-haired Dragonslayer with his mouth open for a counter, but for once in his life, the Fire Dragonslayer had no comeback. That would actually explain a lot, the son of Igneel muttered. I know. The daughter of Levia nodded in confirmation. You may also wish to dodge, Natsu-san. Huh? Dark eyes turned back to his opponent just as he saw the massive cloud of sand that had been formed within the ring of fire. The sand fell like a wave and starved the magical flames of oxygen necessary to keep burning. He was so proud of his creation too, and Natsu felt a little piece of him die inside to see his little guy being snuffed out. The feeling of loss was then replaced with surprise as Urza flickered into existence directly in front of him with her orange blade held back in preparation to strike. HRAH. The beautiful sound of the metal being swung through the air resonated like a wind chime, but the song of the fiery sword was made to die just as the ring of fire had as Natsu raised a single fire-encased hand and caught the blade. A shockwave raced out from the point of collision between hand and blade, with both combatants staring intensely into each other's eyes. Back in the day when he attempted this move, he didn't even have time to block and it was a one-hit KO. The second time, he had improved to the point that he was able to match the timing of her blade's swing, but was easily overwhelmed by her superior physical strength and damaged the walls that outlined Magnolia Town. Among other buildings beyond the hole in the wall, the third they had fought, he was successful in his attempt, but his arms shook and after a bit of futile resistance had succumbed to being flung through the walls of their town yet again. Now here he was, the pink-haired boy who she saw as family, standing tall and strong without even a tremor of weakness in his form. She could not have been prouder of her little salamander. Your reflexes have improved. Natsu grinned toothily as he felt his feet sink into the sands as he resisted Urza's legendary might. And you're still as strong as ever. Flatter me this much and Lucy might get jealous. Urza smirked as she saw the Fire Dragonslayer's eyes widen, a blush now adorning his face. Caught off guard by those very words, Urza took the initiative to kick Natsu in the stomach. His grip on her sword was loosened and the pink-haired mage flew across the beach before bouncing across the sands, only coming to a definitive halt after he splashed into the shallows of the sea. Natsu growled as he rose back to his feet, shaking his wet form and glared bloody murder in the red-haired mage's direction. That was cheap, Urza. You do what you had to do to win the fight, Natsu. The Titania of Fairy Tail gained a foxy grin on her face as she made a come-hither motion. Show me what you got. Karyu no Tekken. Natsu's fists were engulfed in flames once more, the intense heat immediately drying his soaked form as he charged across the sands. He then dug his bare feet into the sands to then go into a lengthy skid, using his forward momentum to go into an uppercut. Urza leaned back and easily avoided the attack before swiping at her opponent's head. Natsu immediately dropped down, ducking under the swing to then go into a handstand. Karyu no Saiga. The fire dragon's crushing tallow as Natsu spun on his hands, unleashing a whirlwind of kicks at the redhead. She raised her sword and the burning blade released a series of clangs as every single one of Natsu's kicks was intercepted. Natsu roared as he bent his elbows and pushed himself high into the air. He then went into a quick front flip to bring down a strong hammer blow upon Urza's skull, but the armored woman countered with an upward swing. Sword and fist collided with a resounding shockwave that seemed to shake the very sands, but Urza's monstrous strength won out in the end as she sent Natsu back. The pink-haired Dragonslayer did not let up however, for as he landed on his feet, he had already channeled his magic energy. His body swelled as he took a deep breath and unleashed the full force of his flames in one shot. Karyu no Hoko. The roar rocketed towards its intended target, turning the sands beneath it into glass in the process. A powerful explosion occurred and Urza was lost from view in a cloud of sand and embers. Natsu smirked as he watched the wide-eyed reactions from the crowd before turning back and offered a thumbs up to his guildmates. So, do I get a cut of the winnings? He asked. You never bet, so you get nothing. Kana informed the Dragonslayer. A frown adorned the young mage's face at those words. So you exploit me for your own monetary gain. Glad you finally figured out how our relationship works, Natsu. Kana laughed as she walked up and patted Natsu on the cheek. Though, bets still can't be handed out until the fight's over. Natsu turned back forward as Kana pointed in the direction of the dissipating cloud of sand. Urza stood as tall and proud as she always had, and having an armor that reduces damage from fire by 50% certainly helped with that. Getting in one shot and already thinking you've won? Urza raised an eyebrow at her guildmate. Even if you were stronger, to have that much overconfidence. You should know better than that. Just making a little joke for the crowd, Urza. The fire Dragonslayer chuckled. I'd be pretty disappointed if you went down only from a roar. The surrounding crowd became louder and more giddy, cheering for their respective favorite. Alright, that's enough. A loud clap was heard across the beach and all activity seemed to stop in that moment. The crowd parted slightly as the sound of synchronous marching met the ears of all present. The members of Fairy Tail all rolled their eyes in annoyance as the members of a small squadron of the Rune Knights appeared on Natsu and Urza's battleground. Lahar stood front and center at the head of his troops. As much as I enjoyed viewing the fight and would also like to see what the outcome would be, I'm afraid that those few moments were all I could spare for you too. The Rune Knight head captain stated as he adjusted his glasses. Dark eyes then shifted to look upon the Titania of Fairy Tail. Urza-san, you are not in any sort of trouble, but you have been summoned to the Magic Council HQ building. We will give you time to change your clothes and gather your belongings. Ah, but Urza and I still need to finish our fight. Lahar could only shrug his shoulders as the salamander. My hands are tied, Natsu-san. This is an order from the Wizard Saints, specifically from your own guild master. Ji-chan wants to see her. Natsu tilted his head in confusion. But he's the one who sent us here in the first place. Natsu, it's alright. If it's an order from master then I have to oblige. The Titania's body glowed with the light of her magic as she activated her requip and changed into her standard Heart Cruise armor and a basic sword. I will return once this matter is sorted, so there is no need for me to pack my belongings, Lahar-san. Understood. Urza walked towards the glasses wearing Rune Knight and stood beside him as the other members of the squadron formed a circle around them. A bright violet light shone from the sands as the magic seal for teleportation magic sprung to life beneath their feet. We'll continue our fight some other time, Natsu. We better, I still got a whole can of whoop ass to give you. Urza laughed, the purple light growing brighter as the necessary magic energy had been pumped into the spell. Urza gave her friends and the crowd of people a small wave before she vanished from view. Magic Council HQ, Oaktown. Fury. Over the course of the past 2 months since the Kyuubi attack on Era, Clover Town had finally been rebuilt and its security assured by the placement of a permanent Rune Knight protection unit placed within and around the town. As a result, the Magic Council itself no longer made its home within the Fiorian Branches building and now resided within Oaktown. As per the official records, a few months prior, There had been the mysterious case whereby the castle that had once been the guildhouse for Phantom Lord had vanished. Many a night had been spent investigating the empty piece of land as for an entire castle to disappear in a flash of purple light and a large plume of smoke obviously spelled the work of mages. Unfortunately, the case ended up becoming cold as no evidence had been found to relate the Phantom Lord castle's disappearance to any known dark guild activity. Though the question still remained as to who would go out of their way to steal an entire castle, and that question would continue to remain unanswered till the end of time. After all, who would guess that an SS-class criminal mage who was known throughout the kingdom as a powerful user of wind magic had the ability to transport objects through a targeted manipulation of space and time by using seal magic? On the plus side though, due to the loss of the disbanded guild's castle, there was now a large vacant lot of land that was perfect for the new Magic Council HQ to lay its foundation. Also, from a military standpoint, Oaktown was situated a rather hilly region and contained remnants of many battlements and turrets that were still viable for defensive combat. Of course, the same could have been said for building the first HQ atop the mountain in the center of Era, but it could easily be countered by the fact that the Magic Council would never expect for the most powerful dark guild of their time to drop a nine-tailed fire-breathing fox in the center of their headquarters. With those thoughts in mind, the Magic Council HQ now stood as a powerful fortress that possessed only the finest when it came to its construction materials and the technology it housed. The turrets and battlements had all been equipped with anti-aircraft weapons, while the council building itself contained a now fully functional Eternano energy shield that was tested to withstand the full force of a Jupiter cannon blast. Unfortunately, the kingdom had spent a massive amount of its budget to create the allegedly impenetrable fortress of a headquarters. However, in the eyes of both the kingdom and the council, the money was well spent, and to celebrate its opening, a celebration was currently being held in the massive courtyard that would later be used for the training sessions of the Rune Knight Corps. With a wide area that was large enough to possibly house 2 entire guildhouses, it was enough to serve its purpose, and it was more than enough room to carry out the current event that was to occur. Almost the entirety of the Rune Knight Corps was present, standing at attention with their weapons held proudly. Some held banners bearing the crests of the Rune Knights, while other banners held the crest of the Magic Council. Standing on the peripheries of the courtyard, the media of Fury stood at the ready with their camera lacrima as the event was to be broadcast across the entire kingdom. Standing atop a stage at the very forefront of the courtyard, the current 6 members of the 10 Wizard Saints stood in their respective professional wear. Things have really changed, Maki, Warred chuckled as he stood alongside his fellow Wizard Saints. So many camera lacrima for people to watch this from home. Back in my day, required you to come here in person. No kidding. Makarov shifted his gaze to God Serena, who stood between Hyberian and Wolfheim. Though if it were just me, I would have come here just to see God Serena's face in full view instead of this celebration ceremony. God Serena was indeed present for the world to see. An enigma of a man who officially held the title of being the strongest. He was the strongest among the 4 gods of Ishgar and was officially recognized as the strongest mage on the continent, and whenever he made a public appearance he would always have his hood up. Now, here he stood, revealing his handsome face to the crowd. Despite the scar that adorned his nose, he still made many people of both sexes blush and or swoon. He had medium-length, wavy and spiked orange hair that jutted out at the top in a shape similar to rabbit ears, and with his cloak now gone, the man's full garb was present for all to gaze upon. He was dressed in fanciful white, black, and red robes and wore simple boots. The most noticeable attribute of his outfit was the large wheel of blades on his back resembling a dharma wheel, giving him the superficial resemblance of a divine figure. God Serena-sama. God Serena-sama. Just a couple of questions before the ceremony begins. Oi! The Rune Knights that stood in front of the Wizard Saints quickly crossed their weapons to bar the media from getting any closer. Don't force yourself beyond this point. Serena laughed as he waved his hand in a nonchalant manner. Mama, it's alright. I think we can spare a couple of questions before the ceremony, nay? The Rune Knights gained conflicted expressions. On one hand, they needed to do their jobs. On the other, they were being told to do something from the most powerful man on the continent. In the end, respect and fear pulled ahead to make the Rune Knights nod in complacency to the orange-haired titan of magic. Now, young mortals, Serena threw his head back in the most exaggerated way possible with his arms spread. Come, what doth the common people wish to ask of God Serena-sama? Sweat drops immediately adorned the backs of everyone's heads as the strong and silent persona of God Serena had immediately been reduced to dust as the man unleashed his true colors as being the personification of flamboyancy. If his loud exclamations weren't enough, he also began making weird exaggerated poses with every 2 or 3 words he spoke. Fortunately, there were times he spoke complete sentences without those poses, so it showed that the orange-haired saint was capable of being somewhat normal. You know, now that I see him and I hear him speak. Warred leaned a bit closer as he saw Makarov's face twist into an expression of disappointment. I find him very The green magic user ushered for his former guildmate to continue. He's a worried. The titan of fairy tale spoke without restraint. The man's a fucking. Ha 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 ha. Warrid laughed at the dwarf's words, patting the much shorter mage on the head. That he is Maki, that he is. You there, the beautiful black-eyed beauty in the front. Me? A young woman with a notepad pointed to herself, a blush adorning her face. You are, indeed beautiful, God Serena shouted before placing a hand to his face in dramatic distraught. However, I was actually referring to the young lad beside you. Huh? The young lad in question pointed to himself and received stares of shock and confusion that practically mirrored his own. His expression only increased in its emotional output as the orange-haired wizard saint nodded. Now come on my boy. What doth the common mortal wish to ask of the mighty god Serena? Wait. The reporter waved his arms in an X-shaped manner. You're gay? Not at all, Serena exclaimed. But all things, people, women, men, all are seen as beautiful in the eyes of God Serena. God Serena then stepped forward towards the edge of the stage. He lowered himself on bended knee, carefully caressing the side of the young reporter's face with a half-lidded expression on his face. Those that are exceptionally beautiful will also gain the opportunity to experience the love and affection that only God Serena can provide. So you're bi? Interpret how you wish. God Serena loves all who stand before him, man and woman alike. With another bout of exaggerated poses, Serena climbed back to his feet and then pointed to a blonde woman to the left. Hair of gold, eyes of ocean, what doth you ask? Oh, the blonde woman caught sight of the finger aimed at her before coughing. Well, God Serena-sama, we know so little about you as opposed to the other wizard saints. Before their passing, Minato Namikaze and his wife, Kushina, they were very open with who they were as people. When they died, you and the other gods of Ishgard took your places as the strongest of the continent's magic users. All we know about you are your titles. Would you mind telling us a bit about yourself? An open-ended question. God Serena laughed. Brilliance. I shall show the brilliance of God Serena. The reporters had their notepads at the ready, pens poised to strike. My origins, they are tragic. God Serena released a choked sob. I was born, with money, to a high-end family. What part of that is tragic? The Throm thought with narrowed eyes. I had much wealth and power. Dark eyes then gained a dull look, losing the bright shine of excitement they held throughout his entire speech thus far. I served as a major alongside my brother in Bosco. The Serena family possessed a magnificent bloodline. An aptitude for immense strength. God Serena suddenly stripped off his shirt to allow those present to gaze upon an upper body that possessed a lean and well-defined musculature that it was as if it had been sculpted with the utmost perfection. Serena then enhanced this look of divine physical appearance by some forth twinkling lights that decorated the air around him. The Serena family had also possessed a magic prowess that has been passed down for generations. So the god in your name isn't a title, but your actual name? One reporter interrupted. Indeed. God Serena of the Serena family. A powerful name that is a testament to the strength. God Serena flexed his muscles before some forth a powerful aura of magic that shone like a holy light, an elegance of the Serena legacy. A female reporter coughed as she fought to retain her composure. The man's flamboyancy was just too overwhelming, but she had to muscle through and do her job. Clark Kent, Daily Planet. And what made you leave Bosco to come settle in Fury if you had such a lifestyle? I did not settle, God Serena laughed. I was chosen. I am a wizard saint, with power and strength recognized for decades served under the Boscoan military. I had earned the eye of the wizard saints. I earned my place amongst the strongest, thus, I am the first, of the Serena family, to hold this title. It shall be remembered in the annals of the Serena family for generations. Lonnie Choi from All About Mages magazine. So being a mage of such a distinguished family, do you possess some form of legendary magic? Or are you a supreme master of some basic magic like fire magic or light magic? I possess many a magic. God Serena's magic spiked suddenly and the Magic Council building seemed to tremble as the man before them, despite his comedic personality, revealed that his power was no laughing matter. 8 magics. I have mastered all 8 of the magics that have been passed down the Serena family for generations. None have been successful, but I have. Thus, I earned the illustrious moniker, Hybrid Theory. 8 branches of magic? One reporter could not help but voice his surprise. And you've mastered them all? Your disbelief, it does be understandable, but it is true. That is truly an amazing feat, God Serena-sama. A female reporter nodded before pointing her pen at him. However, it seems that with powerful foes that can challenge you, like lions. What do you say about them? Cowards, God Serena bellowed. Mages of immense villainy. They hide in the dark, afraid of my superiority. As the reporter made her note, the other wizard saints could not help but applaud the serious personas that the reporters were capable of upholding. They were truly far more worthy of praise than they were, as the 5 wizard saints could not help but continuously sweat drop and or shake their heads in exasperation at the orange-haired mage. COOOL. The deafening voice of the reporter of Sorcerer magazine made the small crowd roll their eyes in exasperation. The blonde man hopped up to the front as he stood before God Serena. That definitely a cool backstory. And a cool declaration of war against the Balam Alliance. From the way the man spoke, many would assume the man to be a total idiot. However, as annoying as his tendency was to constantly spout the word cool in almost every sentence he spoke, the man was worth his weight in gold. He won various awards for his engaging and vibrant articles for the magazine, and it was why he was still employed and earned a hefty paycheck. His flamboyancy was practically equal to that of God Serena's as the two grinned brightly at each other. Oh God. If they become friends. Makarov paled at the thought of 2 screaming, eccentric idiots running around the kingdom. I don't think the kingdom can handle so much eccentricity, Jura commented. Makarov, though I do understand your thoughts. Your guild is full of these sorts of people, isn't it? Hyberian asked as he offered the Titan a side glance. Well. Makarov pulled at his mustache before his head dropped with a sigh of resignation. His guild really was like a clan made of God Serena's and Jason's. Cool, cool, cool. Jason continued to scream before pulling out his pen. So what are your thoughts of the Ogo no Fujin and the Onibi Myobu then? The world seemed to fall silent at the blonde reporter's question, and God Serena, after all of his bouts of exaggerated excitement, suddenly gained a look of silent fury. His face contorted into a grim expression that made the scar across his nose seem to ripple. My thoughts? Yeah. Jason seemed to ignore the tense atmosphere as he pushed the topic. SS-class threats. Do you think it's cool they threaten your title of the continent's strongest? Threaten? Me? Serena's eyes narrowed dangerously and the sparkles of light that hovered around his body blinked out of existence. The Onibi Myobu. The Kyubi. It is indeed a powerful existence. I will admit that I do not know how my abilities will compare to a beast of that magnitude, but as for the Ogo no Fujin, he is but a mortal playing at being a god. His abilities are always described as being far above that of the normal mage, but I am this world's strongest. I cannot be defeated by a mage such as him. All eyes were wide with shock as they registered the tone with which God Serena spoke. It was terrifyingly calm, and the fury that had been masked by the monotone with which the strongest of the gods of Ishgar spoke was sure to leave quite an impression on everyone present. COOOL. Jason seemed to be immune to the intense atmosphere generated by Serena. The blonde reporter wrote down on his notepad with gusto before giving a thumbs up to the orange-haired mage. Just the kind of cool lines I'd expect from you, God Serena-sama. I know, right? Serena's light particles suddenly flashed into existence once more as he flexed his muscles, utilizing words in such a manner to make the language shine and captivate people. It is a skill that has been passed down the Serena family for generations. Ishgar's strongest gave a haughty laugh as he began to return to flexing, sparkling and exaggerating every action that he performed. The Rune Knights and the reporters were quickly caught up in it and began to laugh and ask their regular questions, but the Wizard Saints all watched their strongest member with narrowed eyes. He's truly dangerous, Makarov stated. He's a still A, but he's still dangerous. Wait till you see him on the battlefield. Wolfheim spoke with his trademark growl. You think he's dangerous just by hearing him speak seriously? The man has devastated entire armies by his lonesome. Hybrid theory does not even begin to describe what he is capable of when he combines the magical artillery he has at his disposal. Indeed. Hyberian turned and glanced at his watch before nodding. I truly am sorry, everyone. The vampire magic user stepped forward and placed a hand on God Serena's shoulder while offering a small smile to the crowd. I'm afraid that your question and answer session will have to come to an end. It is now time for the ceremony to begin, but there is a treat for you all to enjoy for your various media outlets. I guarantee it. Goodbye, my lovelies, God Serena bellowed. We shall meet in the future, I promise. The reporters nodded, their curiosity encouraging them to follow through with Hyberian's words as they stepped back from the stage. The mustached number 2 of the Wizard Saints remained at the forefront of the stage where a microphone had been placed for him by a Rune Knight. The vampire magic user adjusted the mic to suit his stature before clearing his throat as the camera lacrimas were all activated. Welcome one and all to the grand opening of the new Magic Council headquarters. I am Hyberian, the number 2 of the Wizard Saints and the head of the elite strike force known as the Gods of Ishgar. I was just asked to perform the opening statement. Gives me less work than I already have to. He gave a sly wink to accompany the light-hearted statement, earning a few chuckles from the crowd. So, to perform the actual address to the nations of Ishgar, I give you the head captain of the Rune Knights, Lahar. The Rune Knights released a resounding cry as they stamped the butts of their weapons on the ground in unison, while the reporters gave a few rounds of applause. Lahar walked straight down the pathway that his Rune Knights had outlined. However, what caught the crowd off guard was that Lahar had 4 individuals trailing behind him, one of which was a visibly confused Urza. Her brown eyes shifted, analyzing the courtyard for all it was worth, but she was still very much confused as to why she had been called to the opening ceremony of the new Magic Council HQ by her own guild master. "Please stand here," Lahar instructed Urza. She did as she was told and watched as the other 3 individuals stood in a line beside her. She felt the magical energy signatures coming from their bodies, thus identifying them all as mages, and they were all monstrously large. She didn't mean to toot her own horn, but Urza knew she was strong. A prodigy of requipped magic was what many had called her when they saw her in action. However, the other 3 people that stood before her were a threat to how she saw herself. Before she could take a good look at them, the sound of Lahar tapping on the microphone made her focus on the scene in front of her. "Thank you for the introduction, Hyberian Sama." Lahar nodded to the Cape Man as he took his place between gods Serena and Jura. This is indeed a day of celebration, however, this little glimmer of light is not enough to counter the darkness that plagues this continent. Chaos is reigning supreme, and it has begun to spread beyond our walls to infect other kingdoms on this continent. Seven was forced to endure the brunt of the fallout that came with Heaven's Fall, and it was clearly a miracle that whatever disastrous battle that occurred at our borders when the Kyuubi and those demonic monsters battled did not reach further into Seven's territory. Desierta's internal conflicts with the slave traders has begun to escalate. Belam's warring clans have had no end to their bloodshed in the past 50 years, and for Fury has endured multiple attacks from dark guilds across the kingdom, suffered terrorist attacks that have left deep scars on the hearts of both the land and its citizens. Of those attacks, we have lost our governing organization surrounding all things magic. The Magic Council was wiped out, all of them killed in the Kyuubi attack 2 months ago. A moment of silence out of respect for the fallen Rune Knights and the Magic Council members whose lives were lost to the Kyuubi. However, Lahar's voice returned with vigor. As a result of the loss of the Magic Council, I, Lahar, was currently working alongside my most trusted lieutenants and generals within the court to keep the Magic Council running in the absence of our fallen. A pause was made as a round of applause was made for the young head captain, both in acknowledgement and in thanks for his services. "Thank you. As head captain, the bulk of the responsibilities fell to me. However, I am only one man and the Rune Knights are not equipped to deal with the affairs of mages on a continental scale. So, a meeting was made with the men you see behind me. The 10 wizard saints are some of the most well-respected and powerful mages who were gathered from across the continent to serve in the acts of protecting the magical community across the continent. Years of alleged peace and pride have restricted their actions to fury as a result, but no more. This time, the 10 wizard saints will return to their true number and true purpose of protecting not just Fury, but all of the continent. In this time of chaos, pride and prejudice must be set aside and bonds of friendship should be forged. Allies will be made and the Magic Council will rise from the ashes to become stronger than it was before. For today, your new Magic Council will be led not by an inexperienced Rune Knight captain, but by mages. Behold, the 10 wizard saints, your new Magic Council." Lahar made a grand gesture to the wizard saints and a loud round of applause was made for the 6 mages. Across the continent, those with access to lacrima vision watched with amazement at the proclamation. Some had their eyes narrowed in disgust at seeing another wealthy organization make such grand, superficial promises, while others merely watched with indifference, waiting to see where this would go. "Now, I know what you're thinking." Lahar smirked in amusement. "How can the 10 wizard saints exist when there is only 6? Well, the wizard saints themselves endured quite a selection process. They looked far and wide, using every available resource they had to scout the talents from across the continent until they finally made their selection. The 4 mages you saw enter into the courtyard with me are to be the new blood, the newest additions to the 10 wizard saints." Urza's eyes almost bugged out of her head and she looked to Makarov. Her eyes spoke for her as she silently asked the question as to whether or not this was true. A small smirk and a wink was all the answer she needed as shock once again took over her mind. From the Kingdom of Seven, Grand Ruler of the city-state of Uruk and bearing the titles of the Golden Archer and King of Heroes, a master of requipped magic, Gilgamesh Alexei. Gilgamesh was a tall and dignified young man with golden hair standing up like a blazing flame. Though no word could in existence describe the physical perfection of the Golden Archer's appearance, the only one that could be used at this moment was handsome. He had a handsome face, and his eyes, crimson like blood, were visibly not those of a human as evidenced by the slit pupils and seemingly otherworldly mysterious radiance that made those that looked at him feel the need to wither and bow. His body was clad in golden armor with blue accents and had a short, red piece of cloth hung from his mid-thighs while a longer piece of crimson material was draped behind, seeming to come from the back of the armor itself. This only served to enhance the feeling of majesty that seemed to emanate from his body. He, applaud for your king. Mongrels. His arms were crossed in front of his chest from the moment he walked across the courtyard, but the way he held his head high, wearing the smirk of an overconfident ruler who knew he was the best of the best, it simultaneously pissed people off but made them recognize that his power was true and thus they could not question it. From the kingdom of Desierta, she who holds the title of caster of the Nightless City and wielder of illusion magic, Scheherazade. Scheherazade was a tall, dark-skinned beauty with eyes as green as emeralds and seemed to shine in a similar manner. Her hair was long, very long, an ebony waterfall that stretched all the way down to her thighs and was tipped with bits of violet. From her head came 2 large ears that were very much similar to those of the fennec fox and large bushy foxtail that swished behind her. Being a demi-human would have drawn many eyes, but the fact that she possessed a voluptuous figure served to distract from that very easily. Her garb immediately caught the fancy of many an onlooker as it served to enhance the curves of her figure. She wore a black bikini-like top that was decorated with silver that shone and made it seem as if the piece of clothing was fashioned out of the night sky itself. The top was also outlined with golden tassels made from pure gold chains. Despite the durable chain-link strap that held the top in place, it still appeared to struggle to contain her large chest and thus left a massive amount of cleavage visible for the world to enjoy. Her flat-toned stomach was laid bare while her hips and legs were covered by a golden-fitted hip belt and a black full-length skirt with beautiful lines made from actual ropes of gold that had been stitched into the fabric which jingled with every motion she made. Pink feathers, 3 on either side, rustled from the golden chains attached to hip belt. Despite the sexually enticing appearance of her clothing, her place as a warrior and a mage was founded by the equipment of golden armor which covered her entire right arm that had been decorated with various pieces of precious stones that glittered in the light. She wore high-heeled boots that were of the same construction as the armor on her arm. A headpiece, a symbol of her royal status, made out of a golden chain was worn securely around her head with a ruby resting in the center of her forehead. You tell my story in such few words, Lahar-san. Perhaps I should educate you on the art of storytelling. The smile that adorned her face was sweet and genuine, and Lahar fought to restrain his base urges to take her up on the offer before wanting to give her a story to tell about after a night of. He shook his head and fought down the blood that was rushing to his face, among other places, before continuing the introductions. Thirdly, we have the master strategist who is also an intelligent and learned scholar whose skills have earned him the title of the Crouching Dragon. Though he has no specialization, his powers as a mage are stellar. From Bellums, I give you the Shu clan's Zhuge Liang. Zhuge Liang was a tall man, looking no older than his mid-30s. In certain circles, it was blatantly obvious why some would call him handsome. His facial features were sharp just like the black eyes that seemed to analyze the very entirety of the world around him. Even as he looked at Lahar to give a nod of acknowledgement, as he took a small drag from the cigarette in his mouth, the military strategist's eyes looked as if they had already broken him down to his basic components and successfully plotted how to defeat him and his Rune Knight Corps within the next few hours. His brown hair was very long for a man, not as long as Scheherazade's, but still quite long as it came to rest at his sacrum. His clothing was entirely black V-neck t-shirt worn underneath a black suit jacket, a black pair of pants and a black pair of leather shoes. His final piece of clothing was what made him distinguishable from the masses as a long, flowing cloak made of crimson silk billowed in the wind. Beneath the collar of the red cloak was a golden sash that bore the image of a green-scaled dragon across of his status and title as the Crouching Dragon of Shu. And finally, from Fiore's own strongest guild of Fairy Tail, she is the S-class mage whose strength, skill and beauty have given her the title of Titania. Urza Scarlet. Lahar made grand gesture to the 4 before him. The new 10 wizard saints. The grand round of applause and whoops from the crowd had practically fallen on deaf ears as Urza turned around and faced the crowd. Flashes of light of the camera lacrima almost blinded her, but she had endured more than enough of these sorts of photo shoots even before she had become known as the Titania of Fairy Tail. The surreal feeling of it all still registered with her, and it was only when a Rune Knight approached her with the badge of the 10 wizard saints did she truly register the fact that all of this was real. Congratulations, Urza-sama. Yes, she nodded dumbly. Thank you. Council room, Magic Council HQ, Oaktown Fury. A few hours later. There was a bit of time to celebrate once all the fanfare and whatnot had been over and done with. However, Lahar wanted to move along quickly with regards to passing on his duties to the 10 wizard saints, and so once he had given them ample time to drink and be merry, as well as giving Makarov the necessary time to sober up, much to Urza's embarrassment as she was now the target of some rather unsettling stares from her fellow new saint members, he called them all up to the council room where they all sat neatly around a large table. Thank you all for coming here. I know there is a lot that needs to be discussed, so I will get down to the important things. He turned to the Scheherazade and Zhuge Liang. When we sent out the letters asking if you would be willing to become members of the 10 wizard saints, you all had your own ulterior motives, and it is understandable. The glory and honor of being a saint cannot help with quelling the various injustices occurring in your various kingdoms. Gilgamesh-sama has already experienced our aid since the founding of the 4 Kingdoms alliance between Fury, Bosco, Seven and Minstrel, and so we have permission from the king himself to aid your respective endeavors, and we will do whatever we can to help. Thank you, Lahar-san. Scheherazade gave the head captain another blush-inducing smile. Desierta thanks you for all you have done thus far. It is my pleasure, Scheherazade-sama. For now, the clans are all experiencing a lack of resources and so we are all currently at a ceasefire as we attempt to amass food, weapons and whatnot. Zhuge Liang informed the green-haired man. I will bring up the necessary information in our next meeting when we are all together in October. Why October? Warid asked. I believe it to be best to make war decisions with all members present. The native of Belem replied to the tree-like man before shifting his sharp gaze to Makarov and Urza. It is to my understanding that Fairy Tail will be undergoing its S-class trials this September and as such, Urza-san and Makarov-san will both most probably be absent as their guild will be terribly busy performing various missions in order to see who will be accepted to undertake the trials and organize them as well. How do you know this? Urza asked. Makarov-san told me during his drunken stupor. All eyes turned to the dwarf as he simply shrugged his shoulders. It's just the trials, no biggie. The Titan magic user replied. It's not like I was spouting kingdom secrets or something. Makarov-sama. Lahar pinched the bridge of his nose and took a calming breath. Then if there is nothing else for us to discuss, due to his seniority and expertise at leadership, Hyberian-sama shall be the new head of the Magic Council and thus the leader of the 10 Wizard Saints. Are there any disagreements with this? The mongrel has done a fair job at helping the Archer clan when he is present. I second the vampire's position, but as a king I do not expect to be commanded like a common soldier. Hyberian rolled his eyes at the Golden Archer's words, but took them into account. The other 8 Wizard Saints had no quarrel with allowing Hyberian to be their head. Then by your leave, Hyberian-sama. Ever the dramatic one. The mustached Wizard Saint smirked at Lahar. This meeting of the new Magic Council is adjourned. Fairy Hills, Magnolia Town, Fury of course due to her promotion to becoming a Wizard Saint being a public reveal. The moment Urza had returned, she was greeted to congratulations and one of Fairy Tail's celebratory drinking parties. The gravity of her new post still had her reeling and so the effects of the alcohol did little to cure her of it and thus being the overprotective mama bear that she was when sober, Urza took it upon herself to escort her fellow female guildmates back to the dormitory building. Not a few moments later did Fairy Tail's third master find his way atop the roof beside her, looking up at the starry sky above Magnolia. You've done your parents proud, Urza, Makarov stated. Thank you, master. The brown-eyed swordswoman smiled, but she couldn't help but feel a bit of doubt in her mind. It was always a dream of mine. To reach this far in life. Be a strong mage and protect my nakama, sure. But to be a wizard saint. She glanced down the silver badge that had been welded into the left breast of her Heart Cruise armor's chest plate, watching in amazement as the moonlight reflected off of its surface. It still feels surreal, master. Almost as surreal as when you learned that your parents were actually wizard saints themselves? Oh no, Urza laughed. Nothing could ever beat the feelings I had when I learned who my parents were, though, master. Why did you choose me for the position of Wizard Saint? Why? Urza nodded in confirmation. Well that's easy. He hopped up and gave her a mischievous grin. It's cause you're a smokin' hot SXY lady mage and we needed some more ladies in the lineup. Scheherazade is quite the looker too. Ah, finally I can look at outside of the guild. I'm being serious, master. Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze are my parents and the strongest humans to ever walk the planet. With me having their blood in my veins, I wondered if... The swordswoman released a heavy sigh as she looked Makarov directly in the eyes. Did you choose me for the position because of them? Did it influence your decision? Why would you think that? The Titan of Fairy Tail tilted his head in confusion. You know I have always recognized your abilities for what they are. You're strong, level-headed and a capable mage. If it weren't for Mira-chan, I would probably pass down the title of 4th master to you too. Me and Mira? She asked with a raised eyebrow as she turned to face the diminutive mage. Not Gildarts? Gildarts is too free-spirited and as much as he loves the guild and everyone in it, he's far too irresponsible. The elderly guildmaster replied. Hopefully his spending time with Kana, learning to be a father and taking responsibilities like trying to raise her will help him mature as a person. It's for those same reasons that I didn't consider him for the 10 Wizard Saints. Sure, he's powerful and Gildarts has power in spades. But like I said, he's not a good candidate for a position of power and responsibility. He's basically an older version of Natsu in that regard. Ah. Urza nodded in understanding. Well, I'm tired and my old bones need some rest. Makarov stood up and patted Urza on the head affectionately. You're worth the title Urza, and I'm sure you'll do me and your parents proud. Thank you, master. It really means a lot. Urza smiled before leaning forward and kissing the old mage on his forehead. Anything for my children. Good night. Makarov offered her the same good night before hopping off the roof and heading towards his own household. Urza continued to watch the diminutive mage's form as he grew smaller and smaller with the increasing distance until he vanished beyond the base of Fairy Hills. The quickly held onto her long locks of hair as a strong breeze blew.
The breeze settled and the sound of footsteps on the roof tiles met her ears.
He's getting old. I know. There may be some degree of truth to him picking you for your abilities, but at the end of the day, Makarov Drayar is an old man on the cusp of death. He picked you to be his successor to the title of the Wizard Saints, and a firm hand planted itself atop her head, his way of showing affection for the woman he called his sister. I believe he is correct in his assessment that you are worthy of being one. Urza snorted in amusement. Most people would just say congratulations. I'm not most people, Titania. There has never been a truer statement. Brown eyes shifted to look at the blonde Dragonslayer as she poked him on the temple. What did Odo-sama and Okawa-sama say when you told them the news? Tu-chan is proud of you. Says to make sure you don't let the workload get to you. Naruto rolled his eyes in exasperation as he recalled his mother's spiritual remnant's words. Ka-chan can't believe you would even take the job. She hates the work and thinks it was a mistake to even be one. But you're her daughter. You'll be fine. I see. Urza sighed before looking at her brother with a small frown. So what did you come here for? As hard as it is to believe, I did originally come here with the intention to congratulate you on your title. But, then I saw who the other new members of the Wizard Saints were. He stated, I have a spy network that runs throughout the majority of Fury, and I plan to expand beyond the kingdom's borders and make alliances with the members of those nations. Gilgamesh, Scheherazade and Zhuge Liang are some of the most influential people on the continent, and if I can somehow gain their trust and make them ally with me, then I would be one step closer. One step closer to what? Naruto was silent for a moment as he shook his head. I can't tell you that, not yet. So you will tell me one day? When the time is right, was the blonde's reply. However, back to the current topic. As I said before, I have a spy network. I have some members in the Magic Council, and because of that, I actually knew about your promotion to Wizard Saint long before it was publicly announced. And what do you need from this? Urza's eyes narrowed. If you wish to try and destroy the Magic Council from the inside out, I'm not helping you. You can be disappointed with me and be angry, but I'm not helping you take innocent lives after all that's happened. You assume too much, Titania. He tapped Urza in the center of her forehead. Think, if I had wanted to make the Magic Council implode, I would have done it months ago. Like I said, I want to expand my alliances beyond the borders of Fury. To gain access to influential powers like the 3 new Wizard Saints is quite a boon. I just want you to find out for me what it is they want. What they want? The redhead tilted her head in confusion. What do you mean? Gilgamesh is already an ally since he comes from 7. However, Zhuge Liang is from a nation under constant war, and Scheherazade would not venture from such a far-out desert region to come to Fury for no reason. Being a Wizard Saint is quite an achievement for a mage, something that provides status and social power across the entire continent of Ishgar. But hailing from a nation where the slave trading business is still a profitable venture makes me wonder what it is exactly she truly wishes to gain from making an alliance with Fury. Tell me what she wants and I can take it from there. Alliances. She looked at her brother with an unsure look in her eyes. That's all you want? Yes. A moment of silence passed between the siblings until Urza gave a sigh of resignation. Fine. I will help you, Oni-sama, but once I get this stuff, I want something from you in return. You're quite the child. Naruto rolled his eyes as he pushed himself off the roof and hovered in the air in preparation to leave. Very well. You get me my information, and I will do whatever it is you require of me provided it is within reason. You have my word, Titania. Good. A confused expression then crossed Urza's face, making her brother obtain one in turn. What? The Apocalypse Dragonslayer took note of how his sister seemed to look past him, and out of pure curiosity had moved to turn his head in order to look. Once his head had shifted a full 90 degrees, however, Urza had moved to strike, and Naruto's blue eyes widened in surprise as he felt the soft placement of his sister's lips against his cheek. Moving on pure instinct, his claws lashed out, but the Titania of Fairy Tail was quick to pull back. Gotcha. Urza giggled as she swung her legs like a girl on a swing, easily avoiding the wild swipe of the blonde's claws as his other hand was placed against his whisker-marked cheek. Rendered speechless for the next few seconds, Naruto hovered higher and higher into the air as a storm of emotions crossed his face until he finally settled on annoyance mixed with mild anger. You are such a child, Titania. And on that note, the blonde vanished into the wind.
Spy Network HQ, Eastern Fury Mountains, Fury. You know, I've always wondered something. Son Goku spoke, breaking the silence that had been hovering over the sleeping forms of his siblings. Kurama, Matabi and Kokuo all groaned in annoyance at the Yanbi's voice.
Were you wondering just how much pounds of force my hooves would need to break your face for waking me up? The Gobi no Umarika made no effort to hide the venom in his tone. A sleepy Biju Exceed was not a happy Biju Exceed. No, Son Goku's yellow eyes narrowed at Kakuo before turning to his Kitsune costume sibling. Kurama, this whole organization that you and Naruto built. How exactly do you afford it all? Crimson eyes met yellow as Kurama shifted his head in Son's direction. That's what you woke us all up for. Well, I mean, if you can afford to pay bills that keep the entire castle running, pay your subordinates and still have money left over, then that means that you should be making quite a hefty sum of jewels, right? You're not wrong. Kurama sighed as he sat up, grumbling in annoyance that he was no longer feeling sleepy enough to return to Dreamland. Our original source of income stemmed from Naruto's dragon parent. He was a stereotypical dragon in that sense, hoarding a vast amount of precious metals and stones. This entire spy organization has been running for approximately a few months now, and we still haven't put noticeable dent in the treasure trove. Of course, we no longer have to rely on just the treasure trove anymore since Fu and Minerva Oba-san managed to get the Kuna Toy Company and Kuna Concern up and running as a profitable business. Officially, Fu's net worth should be in the multi-millions at this point. The goal is that within the next year or two, the Kuna franchise in itself should become worth 1 billion jewels. So let me get this straight. Utabi was the one to speak this time. You're telling us that you have practically a mountain of treasure hoarded over a vast number of years by a dragon and you have the financial backing of a multi-million jewel corporation? Essentially, Kurama nodded. On paper, this spy network does not exist in the paperwork. Instead, we are held under an alias as the Kuna franchise's primary sponsor that provided more than enough capital to get the company off of the ground. As a result, 50% of the entire fiscal year's worth of money made is wired to a private account which the network makes use of in order to supply money for our agents spread out across the kingdom. So how much do we get paid? The Gobi blinked his teal-colored eyes with genuine curiosity. The question sparked the interest of the human mages laying beside them as they all rose up from the soft grass and turned their gazes upon the Kyuubi no Yoko. We get paid? Yugito, Roshi and Han exclaimed. Of course you get paid, you dumbasses. Red eyes rolled in their sockets to the point that Kurama may have possibly been able to see into his own skull. You really think we're so cheap as to not pay our executive members as well as our primary staff? Yes. A momentary silence passed between Kurama and the others, a sweat drop forming on the Kitsune costumed Exceed's head. I don't know if I should be concerned about how quickly they answered that or the fact that they think Naruto and I are that stingy with our money. The Kyuubi of the Nine sighed. The point of the matter is, you do get paid. Everyone who is in this castle or hold the rank of executive members are given a salary. Of course, as executive members, you all get paid a substantially larger amount of jewels than the ex-Phantom Lord mages. Other than Sue, of course. That girl has kept this, practically helped keep this whole spy network afloat. The only ones who don't get paid are the dark guilds under our employ. Why don't they get paid? Yugito asked. Because I don't like them. That's petty, Oni-sama. It's smart. Kurama replied to his hellfire using sister. Like hell are we gonna waste good money on subordinates that are proven liabilities. As far as they're concerned, the dark guilds that Phantom Lord and Oracion Siete were formerly associated with are to answer to us as a source of information. That's as far as the relationship goes. The fact that they are blindingly loyal to Zabrak and Claudoa just makes using them that much easier. I see. The Lava Dragonslayer nodded in understanding. So, out of curiosity, how much do we get paid? Ask Naruto that. Speak of the devil and he shall appear. Not a moment after Kurama spoke those words did the nearby trees get turned into splinters as a howling whirlwind tear through the forestlands. The sounds of combat were no stranger to the mountain forests that Naruto had once called his training ground when he was a child. Acnologia had beat him into the ground more times than he could count, and so when the time came for Wendy to train with him, he made sure to have her suffer the same fate. If he could endure it, then he had absolute faith in Wendy to be able to do the same. The pink and blue-haired Tsukai Doraibu user shook her head to rid it of the cobwebs and climbed out of the small crater her surrogate brother had put her in. She quickly held out her arms, battle instincts crying out as she drew forth her element to block the crescent of wind sent her way. As the wind crescent dispersed, Wendy grabbed hold of the element of the sky. Bending it to her will on a molecular level, she generated friction between the air molecules as magic and physics melded into one powerful burst. Tenryu no Raikurai. The Sky Dragon's Thunderbolt spell came to life as a bolt of sky-colored lightning launched forth from the magic seal that formed in front of her fingertips. A powerful explosion rocked the landscape as the lightning struck its target and Wendy gave a toothy grin at her successful spell. Brown eyes encircled by sky-blue energy shifted to the approving gaze of the Lava Dragonslayer. Her happiness was short-lived however as the smoke cloud where her surrogate brother had been standing immediately dispersed in a burst of wind. A kick to the face sent her skidding backwards and as she came to a stop, the pink in her hair and the ring of sky blue that encircled her brown eyes faded out of existence along with the scale-like markings that adorned her skin. Falling to her knees, Wendy panted, wiping the sweat from her brow. How was that, Oni-san? Better. The simple reply was enough to bring a smile to the younger Dragonslayer's face. Your training with Lava Dragon is proving to yield much better results than I had anticipated. There is always room for improvement, but for now, I would say you have a passable grasp on using your drive mode as well as. Oi Fujin. Naruto and Wendy both turned in the direction of Han, eyebrows raised at the former Rune Knight's sudden shout. Yes. How much do we get paid? Naruto's confusion only increased, and despite all his intelligence he could only respond with a well-thought-out, huh? Kurama says we have a salary. Ha stated. I never knew that. How much do we get paid? I hardly believe querying your salary warrants interrupting SkyDragon's training, Han. Naruto deadpanned. However, if you were that curious then just check your bank account. We have bank accounts? Yugito, Roshi and Yugito exclaimed. Naruto and Kurama looked at each other, their eyes twitching in tandem. Things were so much simpler back when it was just the two of them against the world. I'm not even going to dignify that with a response. The blonde turned back to Wendy as the blue-haired preteen climbed back to her feet. Are you going to teach me Doragon Fosu next? Wendy asked, excitement paramount in her body language. Her cuts and bruises released a few wisps of steam as her healing factor kicked in, her 12-year-old body hopping up and down as a sign of her replenishing stamina. The blonde Dragonslayer hummed in thought as he looked at the tired daughter of Grandine. Soon, but not right now. YN showcased the strength of a fully realized Dragonslayer. At its very core, the skill is basically an energy multiplier. It increases strength, speed, agility, magic energy output and heightens your fighting instincts to the point that you may be considered invincible. As such, I would like for you to reach a certain level of power before we delve into having you learn to master Doragon Fosu. So first we need to strengthen your foundation. You did well in Edelus, but Fu's counterpart was quick to hold the advantage over you and I'd rather that not happen again should you come across an adversary of the same nature. Also, while your version of the Rasengan is substantially powerful, it lacks the pure power of an actual Metsuryu Ugi spell. But Oni-san. Wendy frowned. Grandine never got around to teaching me those. I am aware of that, Imo Udo. Naruto smirked, a mischievous glint appearing in his cerulean orbs. That's why we will be undergoing the task of creating one for you. What? Why you can do that? Wendy's eyes widened as she turned to Roshi. Can he do that? It isn't uncommon for a mage to branch out and create their own original spells from the magic they utilize. The son of Volcanus shrugged. Plus, you made the Tenryu no Rasengan. It shouldn't be that hard with your level of ingenuity. So are you up to the task, my little sky dragon? A spike in magic energy from Wendy came as his answer. Tech Room, Spy Network HQ. Have you managed to find them yet? Yuki asked as he hovered around the control mechanisms of the technologically advanced castle. You've been asking this every day for the past 2 months, Yuki-sama. Sue muttered as she dragged a hand down her face. And what did I tell you? That you'll tell us when you find them. That I'll tell you when I find them. Sue exclaimed as the ox-costumed Exceed looked at the ground sheepishly. The dark green-haired woman sighed as she walked up to the Hachibi and patted him on the head. Look, I get it. You want to find this bee guy that you made friends with. Isobu-sama wants to find this Yagura person and Seiken-sama wants to meet back up with you Takata. Wanting to be reunited with your friends is understandable, but we can't just expect for them to pop up out of the blue. We only have the descriptions you gave us to go by since none of you can remember where they were before you were taken back to Edelus by Hashirama, and realistically, that's not much to work with. That's true. Seiken muttered. It is Ed. Sue's eyes widened as she looked at the pudgy member of the nine. Seiken-sama, drooling. The slug-costumed Exceed's beady black eyes widened as he caught sight of a string of drool about to fall from his mouth and he quickly sucked it back up. Over the past 2 months there had been one too many an accident involving the acidic substance causing stains on the floor. Initially, the cleaners of the castle did not complain, especially since Seiken was Kurama's sibling and thus was immediately granted high-ranking status, but the line had to be drawn somewhere. That line had been found when the white-furred Exceed accidentally drooled on a few people's shoes and on some of the tech. With staff having to recover from severe foot burns and buy new shoes in addition to purchasing new equipment to replace the ones Seiken had damaged, Naruto and Kurama were quick to lay down the law and made sure to have the Rokubi keep a vigilant eye on his dribbling. Sorry, the pudgy Exceed blushed in embarrassment. Usually I was traveling with you Takata-kun so he would always be watching and reminding me about my drooling habit.
I see. Sue walked over to a different side of the room and pulled up a holographic keyboard, typing out computer commands at a rapid pace.
As I was saying, we don't have much to work with and so finding Killer Bee, Takata and Yagura is going to take a lot longer than 2 months. Our resources, despite being extensive, are still pretty limited. We're doing everything we can, and we would use LORA to help us out given that it has the viewing capabilities equal to that of the satellite square. Aetherion before Heaven's Fall wrecked it, but Fujin-sama currently has us busy with a few other tasks. Like what? Isobu asked with genuine curiosity. The most soft-spoken of the nine plopped his Kyodai game costumed self comfortably atop Sue's hat-covered head, his singular yellow eye looking at the rapid movement of her fingers in awe. Well, I guess since you all are members it wouldn't hurt to tell you. Sue typed a few more keys and then made a swiping motion with her hand to pull up a holographic monitor showcasing the image of a large white, dome-shaped building. A lot of things happened before you guys joined us, and one of those things was when we were monitoring the actions of the Magic Council's Illuminati division, specifically, the Biological Advancements Department, which focused primarily on creating biological weapons run by Professors Charles Darwin and Robert Owen. Seiken, Yuki and Isobu looked as the image of the dome-shaped building was minimized slightly to make room for the two-profile image of the scientists. Why the interest in them? It is not so much of an interest from Fujin-sama, but more of a monitoring task. The Biological Advancements Division had once created something known as the third-generation Dragonslayer project, which involved taking the synthetically created dragon lacrima and implanting it into the magical circulatory system of a Dragonslayer mage. Fujin-sama, being a Dragonslayer himself. While it did not sit well with him, and so an assassination mission was carried out. Their trials had been done in the wastelands where Iwagakure no Sato had once been, and then they shifted to one of their other facilities in what used to be Kumogakure. B actually used to be a resident of Kumo. Yuki informed the spy network's second-in-command. He had been on a mission prior to its destruction. My partner was exiled from Kirigakure. Isobu and Seiken turned to each other in confusion as they had uttered the same words simultaneously. Really now? Su hummed in thought before turning to the dwarf of a woman that was Haru. Haru. Yeah? The blonde turned away from her screen, green eyes blinking owlishly yet suddenly being distracted from her current task. Side task. Just run a background check across the kingdom's population database and see who has a registered place of birth or relation to either Kirigakure no Sato or Kumogakure no Sato. If you find anything, let me know. Understood. With a nod, the mirror magic mage turned her focus back onto the Biju Exceed before her. That might actually help us in the search for your partners, but anyway, as I was saying, Fujin-sama sent Yugido-sama and Han-sama on a mission with Fu-sama at the helm to go and assassinate the third-generation Dragonslayer. It was a success, but at the cost of Yugido-sama's arm and the entire Kumogakure branch of the Biological Advancements Department being destroyed in the battle. So you're monitoring the other branches then? Isobu asked, his single eye looking at the monitor with childish curiosity. The one in Iwa was made active a few days after the Kumo facility was destroyed, and we're monitoring whether or not they would return to performing the third general project. Sue replied as she pulled up the file on the Illuminati division. Our moles in the Magic Council have kept us up to date on what the Illuminati division's current and future works have been. With first-generation Dragonslayers being as rare as they are, not to mention the amount of time and resources that had to be allocated in order to produce another Dragon Lacrima, the Illuminati division completely scrapped the third general project and returned to their main focus being on Beast Wars and Sentinel. Yuki hovered a bit closer to the flickering screen of motion-sensitive light and pixels. His white eyes narrowed as he scanned through the information before pointing to a sentence in the corner of one of the page about a retrovirus. A viral antigen that breaks through the nuclear capsid and implants its own RNA fragments that then bind to the amino acid chains when the cells form DNA, spreading out into the rest of the body and infecting it, which then causes the body to turn on its own white blood cells and making them immunologically inept in the long run. Why would such a thing ever exist? How is this an advancement in biology? Ah yes, the HIV project. Sue muttered with a scowl. The human immunodeficiency virus is a genetic anomaly developed specifically in this young woman, Yakumo. She was the lover of Terra, the Dragonslayer who was used in the third general project. She allowed herself to be the guinea for them in hopes that the Illuminati division could develop a cure. They are working on one, and are getting closer to doing it. But, Seiken sucked up another line of acidic drool as he motioned for the mirror magic user to continue. But, Sue's scowl deepened. As per their directive as a part of the military branch of the Magic Council, they have been developing a way to turn the virus into a bioweapon. You humans really are a disgusting species, the Hachibi said. Sue made no attempt to defend her race. The three Biju Exceed and Sue were then distracted from the current topic of conversation as the doors to the tech room opened. A female Exceed flew through the room and offered a bow to the members of the nine before turning to the green-haired woman. The brown-furred feline held a scroll in her paws before holding it out for the spy network executive to take. Sue-sama, I have returned from Iwagakure no Sato. She stated, Professors Darwin and Owen have agreed to meet, but on the terms that it be on their facility grounds. They are apparently very ecstatic with having the opportunity to study dragon DNA more closely. Very good. Sue nodded as she read through the scroll. Once she was finished reading it, she placed it into Seiken's mouth and the slug-costumed Exceed made the piece of parchment dissolve with his saliva. Yuki and Isobu turned to Sue with deadpan expressions. Our brother is not a waste disposal unit. If he's going to drool all over the castle, he better make that drool useful, was the second-in-command's reply. There was no argument there, and Seiken could only wipe away the excess dribble that had developed to help him dissolve the piece of paper. Bows. Yeah? The dark-skinned sound magic user looked away from his screen, adjusting his gold-framed sunglasses. Sue's eye twitched as she registered the fact that ever since the guild war against Fairy Tail, the bald man never went to get his sunglasses fixed. One of the purple lenses had popped out from a well-placed punch to the face from Elfman, and so his left eye was always visible for the world to see. But the man still wore the damn things, claiming it was a battle scar. There was also the argument for him to stop wearing them indoors within a well-lit room, but that was another issue altogether. "We got the green light for the Illuminati mission," she informed the former Phantom Lord Mage. "You got the scales and tissue from Fujin-sama's dragon head trophy ready, right? I should have them. Right. Around." Bose looked around his workspace before holding up a translucent bag. "Ah, here they are." Inside the bag were a few vials containing the scales and tissue of Morpheus the Phantom Dragon that were currently preserved in formaldehyde. There was no need for the preservation process since Naruto's stasis seal that he had applied to Morpheus' severed head prevented any sort of effects time would have on the dragon flesh. But there was no harm in being careful. 100 scales and 100 grams of tissue from one severed dragon head ready for transport. "Good. I'll take it to Fujin-sama and Myobu-sama," Sue said as the bag was placed in her hands. Insert music. Fairy Tail Dragonslayer. Widen your stance. Do not block, dodge, move faster. The sound of combat echoed across the eastern Fiorian mountain range as the children of dragons underwent their daily training session. "You're being too predictable, use your ingenuity like when you fought in Edalus." Naruto's eyes narrowed as he instructed his surrogate sister in her training. Wendy nodded and went for a swipe with her claws. Naruto parried the blow and took a simple step back to avoid the sweep kick aimed for his Achilles tendon before spinning and slamming his boot into Wendy's chest. The blue-haired Dragonslayer skidded backwards, coughing a bit as she felt as if her ribs were rattling in her chest cavity. "You're too straightforward in what you do when you attack. Your fighting style is based on hit and run tactics. They're your basics. Do not try to be a powerhouse and use your lithe frame to your advantage. I taught you better than that." Wendy took a few breaths before nodding. "I'm doing my best." "You need to do better than your best." The Apocalypse Dragonslayer paused as the blue-haired girl quickly raised her arms to block the downward chop that came at her. Her smaller frame shuddered slightly from the force, but her use of armor kept her from succumbing to her older brother figure's overwhelming strength. She quickly vanished from view as she pushed back and aimed for a kick from the side which Naruto dodged by simply twisting. He quickly countered with a punch to the face that had the Sky Dragonslayer reeling, but she bent backwards, using her flexibility and agility to go into a backhand spring that allowed her to dodge the follow-up kick. "You're being too soft, Wendy," Naruto urged his protege, "harder." "I'm not soft," Wendy exclaimed. "You're just too strong." "I wasn't always this strong. I trained to be this strong." "You had more time. This isn't a fair fight." Naruto bared his fangs, his blue eyes being bathed in ethereal white light for a brief moment as he stepped towards Wendy and delivered a strong right hook. "Armor." Wendy raised her arms and quickly parried the blow, but before she could use her speed to move out of the way, Naruto had already moved to where he expected her to be. His leg was raised and the heavy axe kick came down. She rolled backwards as the ground cracked from the force of Naruto's heel digging into it. "You expect the battle to be fair. The battle will never be fair." Wendy's brown eyes widened as she had lost her footing and ended up falling back. Defenseless, Wendy raised her arms as a feeble form of defense when Naruto moved to strike. His fist quickly grew closer, but the blonde paused as a violet-blue magic seal appeared between him and Wendy. A protective wall of ice sprung forth and a powerful shockwave caused the ice to crack heavily as it took the powerful blow in Wendy's stead. Naruto then hopped into the air and avoided the ice spikes that came at him from below. Once he landed, Naruto's leg was cloaked in swirling winds and he lashed out with a strong sweeping kick. Futon. Senpu Kyaku. The cyclone kick spell separated the upper halves of the ice spikes from the rest of their structure. In one fluid motion, before the ice spikes could even touch the ground, Naruto had performed 3 swift straight kicks and the ice spikes were sent rocketing through the air like missiles towards their intended target. Ice Make. Shield. Magic circuits unleashed an emerald glow as they were activated and the ice spikes were quickly deflected by the heavy swing of a large ice shield. The shield then reverted back to its original form, an arm of ice that was attached to one very conscious Yugito ni Milkovich. Naruto then raised an eyebrow at the older Milkovich twin, his voiceless question being answered with a sly grin and wink. "Like you said, Fujin Nya. The synthetic magic circuits of her prosthesis glowed as they were activated once more. "The battle will never be fair. Are you sure you are up for this, Yugito?" Naruto asked. "Ah, does Fujin Nya actually care?" The feline enthusiasts dripped with sarcasm which made her fellow blonde's eye twitch and only been performing her rehabilitation efforts for 1 month. "Yugito." Mitabi told her partner. "From a medical standpoint, you may be fine as the arm is responding to your commands in the way that your flesh and blood arm would, but nothing, Mitabi-chan." The takeover mage interrupted. "If I'm going to be of use to this organization, I need to be able to go and do my part out in the field." "Yugito-chan." The heterochromatic-eyed Exceed turned to Wendy. "Wendy, tell her to take it easy."
Well Yugito-san, to be honest, from a medical perspective, like Matabi-san said, you are fit to do daily tasks with your prosthesis and from my standpoint, you are ready to start combat trials. But, Wendy gave a side glance to the son of two wizard saints. Are you sure this is what you want your pilot trial to be like? Fighting Oni-san is not exactly taking it slow and steady.
Then I'll fight with you, Wendy-chan. Yugito smiled brightly. That way it will be 2-on-1. You can cover me and Fujin Nya here will consistently be holding back for your sake and that will translate into how he dishes out his blows when he fights me.
She does make a valid point, Imouto. Oni-san, why are you considering this? The Sky Dragonslayer exclaimed.
When I taught you, I did little to hold back, was the blonde's reply. If Yugito wishes to take part in combat then I will welcome the challenge. If it really upsets you that much, then as Yugito suggested, I will allow you both to fight me simultaneously. From that point of view, you can keep an eye on Yugito's prosthesis while it is being utilized as well as continue your own training.
Wendy fidgeted for a moment as her mind raced through the various probable outcomes of how this situation could go down, however it was hard to say no when Yugito looked at her with the same bright and hopeful gaze she had when she first succeeded at moving her prosthesis on command. The blue-haired Dragonslayer released a sigh of defeat, her shoulders slumping. Fine. Yay. The blonde ran up to Wendy and gave her a hug. You're my favorite doctor, Wendy-chan.
I'm your only doctor, Yugito-san, was the deadpan reply. Alright, into position. Yugito and Wendy immediately separated, placing themselves equidistant from Naruto as he stood in between them. Begin.
Insert music. Fairy tale indomitable fairy tale. Ice make. Dragon. Yugito wasted no time as she planted her hands on the ground and a large violet-blue magic seal appeared.
A massive dragon of ice roared to life, arching through the air towards its intended target. Naruto's eyes narrowed before he swung his wind-coated leg upwards. The kick struck with all the destructive force of a cyclone against the ice dragon's lower jaw and the reptile of ice was shattered to pieces. A shift in the air made the blonde's ears twitch before he spun back around and raised his leg high into the air.
Dodge. Gah. Wendy released a gasp of pain from being slammed harshly into the ground from the axe kick that had intercepted her.
I said dodge, Imouto. I heard what you said, Oni-san. The blue-haired Dragonslayer quickly performed a cat spring, pushing off of the ground and aiming to slam her feet right against her surrogate brother's sternum. The blonde quickly positioned his arm and grabbed the younger Dragonslayer by one of her ankles and swung her through the air like a rag doll. However, before she could slam into the nearby tree, Wendy quickly managed to catch her bearings to plant her feet against the side of the trunk. Vernier, an aura of green quickly outlined her form as she rocketed straight towards her opponent.
I warned you about being too straightforward in your attacks, Imouto. Naruto lectured to the daughter of Grandine.
I know, that's why we're doing this, Wendy exclaimed with a grin. Yugito-san. Naruto's eyes widened as he suddenly felt a drop in temperature. The ground beneath him rumbled and he quickly had to take a step forward to avoid the pillar of violet-colored ice that erupted forth from the magic seal. The 20-foot-tall structure then cracked heavily before its upper half was shattered, revealing Yugito to have been present inside its dense, yet hollow structure. He watched as the blonde mage descended from above, her icy prosthesis glowing with green light as the synthetic magic circuits that ran through its structure were activated. Ice make. Sword. The arm itself suddenly morphed into the shape of a blade and the rapidly descending daughter of Ur would have landed a deadly blow to the head had the Apocalypse Dragonslayer not ducked under the strike. He then turned and could only observe as Yugito landed on the ground just as Wendy was approaching. Contrary to her seemingly straight-lined movement, Wendy had actually been descending at an angle. Friction made her skid across the ground just a few feet away from him and the blue-haired girl slid through the space between his legs. Once she got through, she planted her feet against the side of Yugito's ice pillar and pushed herself back up into the air as Yugito had already activated her own spell. Take over. Bandersnatch, Tenryu no Kirusume. Yugito used her long tail to help her, turning her body on the dime despite her form of the Bandersnatch being so hefty. The Bandersnatch was a massive leopard-like creature covered in shaggy white fur with dark gray spots. Its face was somewhat flat, but that did little to distract from its wide mouth that was lined with multiple rows of sharp teeth. A Bandersnatch's natural weapon was the poison that was secreted from the glands within its nail beds and coated its claws to quickly kill prey, or possibly slow them down so it could eventually capture them should said prey ever attempt to escape. Yugito being a Bandersnatch was much more deadly since her other forelimb bore claws of ice that she could willingly allow her to freeze anything she came into contact with. Being caught between these two deadly weapons in addition to Wendy's slicing talons spell would lead to the eventual end for many an opponent. However, Naruto quickly lashed out with a strong back kick that dug into Wendy's belly, ironically knocking the wind out of her, before he bent down low to avoid the slash of Yugito's claws. The massive Bandersnatch's dark-colored eyes widened as she felt her underside's fur being gripped tightly and with a loud yowl, found the world turning upside down for a brief moment before she was sent crashing down atop Wendy's smaller body. Yugito groaned, her body glowing with golden light before she reverted back to her human form. Yugito-san. You're heavy. Wendy squeaked. Sorry kiddo. The blonde takeover mage got off of Wendy and helped the daughter of the Sky Dragon to her feet. She then directed her dark-colored eyes to Naruto and smirked, flexing her eyes prosthesis with joy. But on the plus side, it works, it really works. Naruto nodded in approval as he watched the young woman hop up and down with glee. Indeed, you seem to have made quite a tremendous leap in your capabilities to use your new arm. His blue eyes then narrowed as if he were analyzing the arm. How the arm would be affected when you transform was something I thought about, but it seems that the prosthesis responds to even your takeover magic, adjusting in size and structure to accommodate for your various transformations. Your casting speed is passable in terms of your ice make and when you use it to turn the arm into various forms of weaponry. However, there appears to be some bit of lag in the casting speed of your spells. This could prove problematic should you wish to rapidly adjust from offensive strikes with an ice sword to needing to block from projectiles like bullets or long-range spells within shield. It is most likely due to the synthetic circuit seals we use to allow you to cast your magic using the arm. Is there anything we can do to fix that then? I will make adjustments to the seals with each training session we undergo. We, Yugito Rai. We, Naruto gave his fellow blonde a stiff nod. Each day and every day you will join Wendy for her training sessions. I will ensure that you will gain the most of your combat sessions while also making sure that any and all necessary adjustments to the magic circuits in your prosthesis can be made at the end so as to have you back into optimal shape for combat. This is with the assumption that I will not be preoccupied with other duties. If such events do occur in which I am not able to help you and Wendy, you can join Wendy in her other training sessions with Fu or you can train with any person of your choosing. I choose Han Nya. Yugito bounced up and down with enthusiasm. I see. The whisker-cheeked Dragonslayer turned to the armored man as he was sitting off to the side with Kakuo, obviously surprised by the woman's exclamation. Are you willing to accept the position as Yugito's rehabilitation trainer? I guess. His surprise was then turned to annoyance as Yugito skipped over to him and snaked her arms around his neck in a teasingly seductive embrace. Do you not want to train with little ol' me, Han Nya? If you continue to talk to me like that, then obviously I will be more inclined to leave you to yourself. So mean, Han Nya. A mischievous glint appeared in her eyes as she gave the former Rune Knight a smirk. I would think that after you held my hand for so long after my surgery that you would want to hold my hand throughout my rehab. What the? How did you know about? The former head captain's head snapped in the direction of Kakuo and Matabi who whistled innocently, looking every which way except at Han. Kakuo. Don't be mad at Kakuo and Matabi-chan, Han Nya. I think it's sweet. She then raised herself a bit higher by standing on her tiptoes. Her eyes became half-lidded as she leaned into Han's ear. And if you play your cards right, I might just show you some appreciation. Her hot breath against his ear in conjunction with their current positioning made Han thank every person who was involved in the creation of his armor as it hid his intense blush from view from the blood rushing to his face, among other areas. He fought back the urge to shudder as Yugito's seductive expression was still staring him dead in the face. With a huff, the much taller man pushed Yugito back and cleared his throat to aid in calming his thoughts.
I don't need your brand of appreciation, annoying cat woman.
God, she loved to tease this man. Well, whenever you change your mind, just know my door is always open to you. Shut up. Fujin-sama. The sound of Sue's voice interrupted the scene and all eyes turned to the dark-skinned woman as she ran over to her superior's side. The green-haired mage held the bag containing Morpheus's scales and flesh which the blue-eyed Dragonslayer took with a quizzical look. The Illuminati division has agreed to meet with you in secret and are more than willing to undergo whatever research project you have in mind involving the use of dragon DNA. I see. A look of understanding replaced Naruto's confusion as he nodded. Very well. Kurama and I will depart immediately for Iwagakure then.
Oni-san, what about my training? Wendy pouted. You said you would help me make my Metsuryu Ugi spell. We'll have more than enough time to train once I finish this errand, Imouto. The blonde Dragonslayer assured the daughter of Grandine. For now, you can aid Han as he trains Yugito.
Fine. Do I get a say in when we start training? The former Rune Knight asked. No, the titan of a man's sweat dropped at how quickly his attempt to voice an opinion had been shut down. It's okay, Han. The white-furred Exceed patted his partner's armored thigh in comfort. Your opinion will matter one day. Today is just not that day. Kurama chuckled as he was given a literally massive middle finger as a response. The crimson-eyed Exceed flew over to Naruto and rested himself atop the head of spiky golden locks in preparation for takeoff. Hi-ho Silver, away. I'm not a horse, Kurama. Maybe not in your head. The Kyuubi chuckled. Teiwa, my trusty steed. I hate you. Insert music. Fate, Zero Assassin. Unknown location, Fury Ultir's high-heeled boots made echoing, clack, noises as she strode down the hallways of her guild's main headquarters with Merity walking dutifully by her side. They came to a stop as they reached their location where Caprico stood alongside Bluenote, Gaara and Shukaku. The return of the two sand magic users had been quite a surprise to the daughter of as she, like many within their forces, assumed the pair had perished in the snowy peaks with the rest of the airship. Of course, the same could have been said for Ultir herself, but lo and behold she had returned as well. Merity had been ecstatic upon witnessing her return and she was bombarded with expressions of worry. Despite her somewhat indifferent demeanor towards the pink-haired preteen, Ultir did indeed care for the Magulti-sense magic user and consoled her for the entirety of that day.
Of course, when the questions as to what exactly happened to her when the Ogano Fujin had blown up their airship, the fact that she had been kept as a hostage by the Ogano Fujin was kept on a need-to-know basis.
Though, the term of hostage was debatable at best since no sort of negotiations had been taken between her captor and her guild due to the fact that the blonde's main concern was to get back Kurama. If she was no use to him as leverage for Tartaros, then realistically she had no purpose being his prisoner. The 5 surviving members of the Kin of Purgatory and the Ace of Grimoire Heart all stood in silence in front of the pair of steel doors and as Caprico's towering form performed a mental head count, he gave a bleat of acceptance before standing in front of the sensory lacrima. The crystalline sphere scanned his form, registering his magical energy signature before an audible hiss was heard, signaling that the doors were opening. The room that housed their guild master's original body remained without any source of natural or electrical lighting. Instead, the only light source came from the vertical tube of glowing violet liquid which Hades's nude body currently floated in. Merity's emerald orbs were wide at the sight before her. Ever since she was first introduced to her master's true body, she could not get the image of her powerful leader truly being a man whose age extended past an entire century and was frail. Now, the man was no longer frail and weak and instead looked exactly like the mage whom she had first been introduced to when Ultir, Kane and Zancro first brought her in to join Grimoire Heart. His skin was no longer thin, instead it was taut and covered the powerful muscles which lay beneath. His hair, while still a shining silvery white to reflect his advanced age, was now thick and healthy. His eyes slowly opened, revealing both his naturally green left eye and the completely crimson orb of the devil's eye which replaced his left one. The sounds of oxygen being funneled into his lungs through the breathing mask attached to his face echoed throughout the room in tandem to the sounds of pulsating demon blood which flowed along the artificial blood vessels that constantly fed the violet substance into his containment unit with each contraction of the devil's heart. Master. The celestial spirit knelt simultaneously with the other kin of purgatory. We have come to inform you that all necessary preparations are proceeding as scheduled. Due to the return of Gaara and Shukaku, our efforts to locate the remaining keys of Zareth have yielded positive results. So, we now have all 7 then? Hades asked. Yes, Master Hades. The anthropomorphic goat replied. The army's morale is high with the return of Ultir, Gaara and Shukaku. Also, with the 7 keys of Zareth now all gathered into one location, once you are fully assimilated with the devil's heart then on your command we are prepared to move out. Hades nodded, ejected another liter of demonic blood into his chamber, his crimson eye glowing brighter for a brief moment as the purple liquid flowed through his veins and rejuvenated his strength to a level he had not felt since his prime. Listen well my mages, the goal of resurrecting Zareth and achieving the one magic is something that I have dreamed of for a long time. This dream of mine dates back to before Grimoire Heart was founded. Hades raised a hand and clenched it into a tight fist. Gaining the access to the one magic will give us the ability to control magic as we know, to rewrite the world as we see fit. Power and glory. Life and death. None of it will matter as anything is possible once we utilize the one magic's power to change everything. The one magic is known as the original source of magic. The root of the very power which we mages thrive on and is the magic used by the divine dragons, and Merlin himself was granted access to its power which I believe transferred genetically to his descendants. So you believe Zareth will have the key to unlocking the one magic, Master? Shukaku asked. Indeed, Shukaku. The wizened dark mage smirked beneath his oxygen mask. I have studied for years the act of resurrecting the man who holds the blood of Merlin, and I know for certain that my plans will be successful. His crimson eyes shifted away from the Ichibi no Tanuki and focused once more on all of his guild's executive members.
You have all followed me because you believe in that same success. We have all endured various struggles and have all agreed upon the conclusion that without the one magic, non-mages, all beings that lack the capability of using magic will eventually live in a world consistent with hell. The ideology we share binds us together and binds us in our goal to change the world for the sake of all its inhabitants. Do you not believe in such a world?
Yes, Master. The cry of agreement from the mages brought a smile to Hades's face as indicated by the shift in his facial muscles. Good. The former second master of fairy tale nodded his head. My assimilation with the devil's heart will almost be complete. If my calculations are correct, within 1 month, I will be ready to see the battlefield once more and we will set a course for Tenro Island. Master, about that. Altair looked up at her master, a look of concern marring her pretty face. It is to our knowledge that the mages of Fairy Tail will be undergoing their S-class trials at that time. The mages of Fairy Tail are sure to have grown stronger during the past several months and it is expected for some of them to have done so if they wish to take part in the trials. Altair informed the older mage. Are you certain that you wish to proceed with immediately heading for Tenro once you have completed the assimilation process? Insert music. Code Geass all hail Britannia, of course, my child. Hades' demonic eye shone as if to personify his conviction. I am well aware of the S-class trials time period and it matters close to nothing. Those pitiful fairies, that child Makarov in particular, they will not have the power nor the resources to combat the power of Grimoire Heart. Especially not when my power rivals that of deities. To solidify his statement, a powerful force of magic filled the room and to the mages before him. They felt as if gravity had increased 50 times over.
They had all felt their master's power before, whether it be out of reminding them their places beneath him in the ranks of the Dark Guild or out of just purely flexing his magical muscles, but this time.
Oh fuck all kinds of duck. Shukaku shifted his eyes as he caught Gaara's own side glance. To anyone else, the red-haired sand magic user's face seemed to reflect its normal apathetic expression, but after having been by his side for so long, Shukaku recognized Gaara's concern within those green eyes of his. The pale-skinned human shifted his glance skyward for a brief moment, a wordless signal to have Shukaku make a report. The geokinetic Ichibi of the Nine blinked in reply, agreeing with Gaara's choice of action. Kurama. Oi, Kurama. The Ichibi reached out to his eldest sibling and prayed to the dragons that the Kitsune would choose to pick up on their telepathic link this time. Come on you dumbass fox, pick up. Shukaku, you do know that I can hear you right? Seems prayer did work sometimes. I am on my way to Iwid to talk with the Illuminati scientists with Naruto. Is this important? It's Hades. Shukaku raised his head, his golden eyes meeting the orbs of green and crimson. Remember how I told you about how he was doing this experiment stuff, taking in demon blood into his system to rejuvenate himself?
Yeah, well, it worked. The Tanuki could practically feel his Kitsune brother's eyes narrowing as he registered the severity of the situation.
How strong is he now? I was told the demon blood would just give him back his youth. Now the guy is well over 100 years old, so he predicted that the power boost wouldn't be that significant, but we were wrong. We were so very wrong. The Tanuki-like Exceed sweated a little as he continued to feel the rise in power from the elderly mage before him, and it felt as if the limit was nowhere in sight. He was powerful for a human. He cannot hope to match the Nine, and if the Dragonslayer go all out and use the powers they used when they fought the Jubi, then he's in for the fight of his life. But, Kurama, this magic of his, it's far more deadly. It's more sinister and corrupt, and feels even more so than when we were first split off from the Jubi.
I can describe it as practically being downright evil in nature. This isn't the sort of magic energy that a human or any living being should be wielding. Hades, he's not human, not anymore. Shukaku replied. We have a month before the assimilation process is completed and sabotaging it is out the window at this point. Plus Naruto stated he personally wanted hand Hades' ass to him on a silver platter, so if you don't want me to kill him, I don't really see what much else I can do. Alright. The Kyuubi no Yoko nodded his head. You and Gaara have been doing good work and reporting this to me was a smart choice. The plan we have against Grimoire Heart is still in effect. We are sure as hell not going to let them escape, especially after they tortured Naruto and them having a part to play that allowed Tartaros to kidnap me. Hades receiving his little power boost will have us make a few adjustments, but nothing major. Don't worry. I'm not worrying. The geokinetic Exceed before releasing a mental sigh as he consciously had to hold back the urge to rub his temples. Just do what you have to do.
Biological Advancements Division Facility, Iwagakure no Sato, Fury. Charles Darwin and Richard Owen stood in front of their facility as they exhibited the epitome of patience. Of course, most of their works revolved around being patient. Taking samples to test. Waiting for the results of those very same tests. Realizing that something may have gone wrong in the research process and so they would end up having to repeat all those tests again. They had dealt with things that would cause a lesser scientific mind to crack from the insanity of it all, but for all their brilliance, it stood to reason that they wouldn't be all that right in their mindsets. After all, what sane person would agree to a meeting with two SS-class criminals in exchange for the chance to study dragon DNA? Do you think he will come? Owen asked. We are the most brilliant scientific minds on the planet, Richard. Darwin huffed. Of course he will come. SS-class criminals don't exactly just drop out of the sky to hand dragon DNA out of the blue. A sonic boom echoed across the skies of what had once been the thriving society of the Hidden Stone Village. A visible jet stream marked the path of the approaching object and the two scientists were forced to cover their faces as a small dust cloud formed from the force of Naruto's impact. In a split second, Kurama three-tailed formed and scattered the dust cloud with a single swish of his tails. You were saying, Charles? Owen coughed out with a chuckle. Humph. I stand corrected. Darwin muttered. Naruto adjusted his face mask and hood as he rose up from the kneeling position that Kurama affectionately called his superhero landing. It had been so long since he last pulled up both the mask and the hood that it was actually a bit irritable, but for the sake of appearances he had to don them. Kurama and Naruto then walked over to the pair of scientists, taking note of their very calm demeanors. The two SS-class criminals had to hand it to the pair. If they felt any manner of fear, they did one hell of a job to hide it. Professor Darwin, Professor Owen, Kurama greeted the two. Onibi Myobo. Ogo no Fujin. Owen responded as he gave a nod of acknowledgement to the two. Darwin glanced to the small bag that Naruto was currently holding in his hands, and the elderly man had to consciously prevent himself from salivating before the samples of dragon DNA being offered to him. Insert music. Naruto Shippuden Girei. I trust that bag holds the dragon DNA inside? Indeed it does, and I am willing to part with it, Naruto stated. But, the blonde glanced at the scales of Morpheus in his hands. I am not sure how you managed to procure the scales the Illuminati division obtained to create the dragon lacrima for the third-generation Dragonslayer project, as the savage lands are not exactly within close proximity to the kingdom, nor are they teeming with dragon corpses. However, I am willing to provide you with any extra materials as well as funding for the research purposes I have in mind for you. However, we have a set of requirements we want you to fulfill. Kurama raised a tail as if it were a finger. Firstly, both you and Professor Owen are to be considered under our employ, and as far as the Biological Advancements Department is concerned, we own it now. The Magic Council will continue to think that you will be working for them, but in actuality, all information on your current and future projects are to be reported to myself and the Fujin. As such, you give us regular updates on any and all projects. You do not have to use a communication lacrima, as we will supply you with a communication sealed tag in order to remain in contact with us, and thus you will not be caught under the monitoring actions of the Magic Council when you give these reports. What projects would you be referring to? Owen asked with a raised eyebrow. We have quite a number of them. We have quite a few in mind, but at the top of the list, we would preferably like to be informed about Beast Wars, Sentinel and the HIV weaponization projects. Darwin and Owen both gained wide eyes before narrowing them at the Kitsune. How do you know of the HIV project? We have our ways, was the crimson-eyed demon's curt reply. Though that brings us to the second requirement. Scrap the HIV project. What? Darwin exclaimed. You can't be serious. Owen exclaimed. That girl is going to die without a cure. We need to keep researching for her sake. You have been studying Yakumo for the better part of 2 years, professors. Naruto was the one to speak this time. It is useless to continue trying to think that you will develop a cure for her in time. Her immune system has been reduced to a shell of its former self, and her CD4 count is approaching the 200 value. With the normal value having to be above 500. That alone should tell you just how seriously ill she is. This is in addition to the fact that she now has leukemia. Darwin and Owen both gritted their teeth, both in frustration at their own failures being brought to light and the fact that such highly classified information was basically common knowledge to the two magic users before them. If you want to try and generate a cure at this point, you will need to literally destroy her white cells with both chemotherapy and radiation in its entirety and give her a complete bone marrow transplant. She could survive, but her ability to recover from such a process is terribly slim. Naruto showed a rare glimmer of emotion within his blue eyes. Now the Magic Council wants you to weaponize such a debilitating disease to use against other humans as a bioweapon that cause rapid immune degeneration in a matter of seconds, if not immediately. That sort of power is not needed in the world. So take everything about the weaponization aspect of the human immunodeficiency virus and burn it. A few crimson embers flickered out of Kurama's mouth for emphasis. Instead, rather than focusing on ways to kill humans with such a virus, we want you to take the same virus and find a way to mutate so it can affect a different kind of organic life form. Naruto held out the bag of Morpheus's scales and tissue samples. We want you to take the principle of the HIV strain and make it applicable to dragons. Dr. Dragons? Darwin and Owen almost choked on their own spit. Surely you two know that the dragons are the primordial beings of not just magic, but the universe itself, Darwin exclaimed. Do you have any idea of what you are expecting out of us? We are not just talking about fighting any old demonic beasts or wyvern, Fujin, Owen added. These are the most powerful beings in existence. We know what the dragons are. We know what they are capable of. The Futon user was quick to interrupt them before they could go on about just why such an endeavor would be considered impossible. As shown by the fact that I have the samples, they can be killed in combat. However, not everyone can kill a dragon, and so a method must be developed to make them weaker. I say weaker because, as you said, dragons are the most powerful beings in existence, and so I will not expect you to find a way to create a virus that is able to kill a dragon. Instead, create a bioweapon capable of decreasing the density of dragon scales and weakening dragon tissue. You hope to fight dragons with conventional magic or weaponry should we succeed? Owen asked. I do not simply wish to fight them, Professor Owen. The blonde's blue eyes were bathed in ethereal white for the briefest of moments. I aim to go to war with them. You're mad. Owen stated as he looked between both Dragonslayer and Kitsune. The both of you, absolutely mad. Says the man currently making a deal with the most powerful criminals on the continent for dragon DNA. Kurama rolled his eyes. Now do you submit to us or not? Darwin and Owen looked to each other, a silent conversation passing between them through simply eye contact. In the end, the moment of silence came to an abrupt end as the two members of the Illuminati division turned back to Naruto and Kurama. Darwin held out his hand. We accept your terms and conditions. Really now? Naruto raised an eyebrow. Kurama eyes widened marginally. Just like that? Just like that. The two scientists nodded stiffly.
There are quite a number of ways this can all go south for us, but first and foremost, we are men of science.
Darwin spoke with a matter-of-fact tone. We were hired by the Magic Council to take part in the Biological Advancements Department to make things that a normal human would refer to as a monstrosity. The things we've created after the Bureau of Magical Development was scrapped out of existence. They are the stuff of nightmares, but nothing that was ever considered a true challenge for us. This, however. Owen nodded in agreement with his colleague. Indeed, it may be considered madness, but to be able to craft a bioweapon capable of felling dragons. Those are the things that legends are made of. You are smart men. Naruto said, smirking beneath his face mask as he rested the bag in Darwin's palm and handed the communication seal tag to Owen. Now just reiterate. You both are to make the dragon bioweapon a personal project. If you require any additional personnel to assist with the project, you give them only the bare minimum in terms of information, and you winchell backing from us to carry out this project, and you are now considered to be my subordinates. Is that clear? Of course, Fujin-sama. Myobu-sama. Men of great intellect were always easy to make subservient. The man who created the theory of evolution and the man who coined the term dinosaur were no exceptions. Is there anything else you wish to ask or add now before our business here is to be considered concluded? Darwin asked. Now that you mention it, we do need one thing from the facility, Kurama replied. Insert music. Death Parade Moonlit Night. Terra's Grave, Eastern Fiorian Mountains, Fury. The evening sky was alight with a myriad of colors as the hues of purple, pink and orange all blended together to give the once beautiful expanse of blue a fiery appearance. The light of the setting sun cast large shadows as the rays passed across the mountain range, and those rays dyed the emerald grass and surrounding flowers with a golden orange. The sounds of nature were on their last legs as the majority of the region's wildlife prepared for the night, and the silence was practically deafening as Yakumo stared with dull eyes at the gray stone tomb that marked the burial site of her lover. I never thought I would get to see the outside again ever since I was taken in by the facility. The brown-haired woman muttered to herself from her spot in front of her now-deceased lover's grave. Though, I also never thought that I would be the one to outlive her. I mean, I was the sick one after all. A hollow laugh escaped her lips, which turned into a coughing fit for a brief number of seconds. The sound of the grass being trampled beneath feet met her ears as her overseers moved to check on her, but Yakumo raised her hand to halt her overseers. You know, I never thought I would find a significant other when I came out to my parents a few years ago. Being gay was never really something I expected from myself, but by the dragons.
Who would have thought the woman I'd want to spend the rest of my life with was a Dragonslayer mage and owned a bar? The universe is funny like that. Yakumo sighed as the memories came flooding forth. She was filling in for a barmaid who was sick, and then she accidentally tripped and spilled a beer all over my top. An apology, a few well-placed compliments, and a couple of beers later, and I'm suddenly waking up the next morning in this woman's bed naked.
Yakumo stifled a laugh as she turned to the trio behind her, taking note of the tinge of red that appeared on the visible portion of Han's face. It's a nice image for a straight guy like you to think about, nay? Honestly speaking. Yes. Yakumo outright laughed this time, especially when she witnessed the double slap upside the head the much taller man received from Fu and Yugito. Pervert. The two women growled out. Yakumo continued to laugh before patting Han on his leg from her sitting position. Honest men are hard to find these days, and I respect you for that. It was the presence of too many dishonest men that eventually had Terra turning to look for love on the other side of the fence, if you know what I mean. Yakumo-san? Yugito had question written all over her face. Yes, Yugito-san. How did? Yugito bit her lip as she considered whether or not to continue with her question. In the end, she just told herself, fuck it, and took a deep breath as she steeled her nerves. How did you know you loved her? It wasn't love at first sight, I'll tell you that. Yakumo gained a wistful expression. Romance isn't like how the books or the movies play it out to be. We had some stuff we liked about each other, but to reach the point where we were able to say with certainty that we loved each other and that we wanted to spend the rest of our lives together. That took a bit of time. However, if there is one thing that loving someone like that shares with those fictional fairy tales, it's that it does sometimes happen spontaneously. One day, you will look at her for all her faults and think, by the dragons, I can't believe I'm dating this weirdo, and then the next thing you know. The world is a blur and she is the only thing that comes into focus. She stands out to you in a way that the rest of world can't hope to compare in terms of her beauty, her laugh, the way that sharp-toothed grin of hers makes the room brighten as much as the sparkle in her eyes that she gets when she instigates fights to let off steam. In her own bar, mind you. Her entire existence, every fiber of her being was a treasure to me. Tears lined Yakumo's eyes at this point as she gently stroked the diamond ring the Earth Dragonslayer had forged for her. The way her voice cracked was enough to make the three who stood by her feel as if their hearts were being clenched within their chests. When she found out I was sick with this damned virus, she practically moved heaven and earth to try and get me that cure, but even after all those tests and experiments they tried. The tears began to fall freely as she clenched her hands into tight fists. I think I knew deep down that I wasn't gonna get a cure. To learn that I would never get to spend a full life with my Terra crushed me for every single day, and every time she would come to visit me, I was always reminded of that harsh reality. And she still did all that. She endured being a science experiment for me. She turned herself into an abomination for me. She cast aside her pride as a Dragonslayer and her own humanity all for me. I could never deserve a life of love and happiness from someone that amazing, and clearly the universe saw fit to drive that final nail into the coffin when you three were sent to kill her. Anger and fury were alight in those brown orbs as she turned to face them. Fu, Han and Yugito couldn't help but flinch beneath the ferocity of such a gaze, and if they didn't feel guilty before, they were sure as hell feeling it now. You took her from me. You took my Terra-chan away from me. The tears flowed in greater amounts, dotting the grass. I wanted a life with her. I wanted to live in a house and raise kids and learn about the world with her. She was my everything, and you three, you took her from me. Yakumo broke down in that moment. Her cries of anguish echoed across the eastern Fiorian mountain range like the nightly howls of the wolf packs that roamed the forest. Her tears flowed like waterfalls as she clutched her chest, the pain in her heart and soul laid bare for the world to see. Brown eyes became reddened and puffy, still streaming with tears before she suddenly bore a snarl on her face to accompany the icy glare she directed towards the trio. Do you have anything to say for yourselves? Do you have nothing to say for taking the woman I loved away from me? She snapped. Well? She would have died anyway. Han stated. Those words were like a slap to the face for the chronic diseased patient. Why you don't? You didn't. You can't know that. We did, Yakumo. The former Rune Knight spoke with absolute certainty. When we fought her, she started using more and more power from the lacrima in her chest. She would have lasted maybe a year or two at best if she hadn't met us, but the lacrima ate away at her magic circulatory system. She was a mage and thus she would use magic. Every time she would use magic, she would be pushed closer and closer to death. The lacrima burned her from the inside out, turned her to ash. Fu here was sentimental enough to gather the ashes and bury them here. We respected your lover enough to hold a legitimate funeral for her, and trust me when I say that our leader could have just as easily told Fu to toss those ashes to the wind and let them scatter across the four corners of the earth. You think I should be thankful for this? Yakumo snapped, pointed at the grave in front of her. That I should be grateful? No, Fu shook her head. You have every right to be angry and to hate us for this, but it's the truth that like you. Terra was on borrowed time. The moment she was turned into that third-generation droid to die. You are all assholes. Yakumo ground her teeth as she sniffed. The harsh words digging into her soul. Fucking assholes. She did love you with all her heart, Yakumo-san. Yugito said, ignoring the harsh insults thrown their way. She spoke of what she wanted, the life she wanted to have with you before she died. And we are genuinely sorry that we were not able to help her in her time of need. Yakumo's angered persona then became one of despair as she released a shaky breath. I can't go on without her. There's nothing left for me now that I don't have Terra-chan. Yakumo, you can't think like that. Fu frowned as she got down on bended knee, placing comforting hands on the brown-haired woman's shoulders. Terra would not have wanted you to die after she did all she could to save you. No, Yakumo shook her head. I can't do this. Life is too hard without her in it, and if you won't take it then I will just do it myself. There was a brief moment of silence as Fu, Han and Yugito were once again struck with a wave of guilt and remorse. The look of complete loss and emotion on Yakumo's face would have melted the heart of some of the most hardened individuals in existence. An audible gulp was heard as Yugito took a step forwards. Is this really what you want, Yakumo-san? The blonde daughter of Ur asked. Suicide is never the answer, but if you are so resolute in your decision, then it would be easier to just make it quick. Yugito, Han and Fu looked at her with wide eyes. Don't encourage her to do this. We took the one she cared about most in this world and she will end up dying from the virus in her system, so it would be best for her to die sooner rather than later. The magic circuits of her ice arm lit up as she channeled her magic energy. With a violet-blue magic seal acting as the herald, Yugito turned her arm into a sword and raised it high. If you wish to die, then it shall be on your own terms, right? I just want the pain to go away. Yakumo looked up at Yugito with hopeful eyes that began to darken in tandem with the sky as the sun finally began to vanish from view in its entirety. I want to be with my Tara-chan. I am so sorry, Yakumo-san. Yugito whispered as tears streamed down her face. Truly I am. Thank you. Yakumo closed her eyes and Yugito brought the ice sword down. Insert music. Fairy Tail 2014 Magic Council theme. Magic Council HQ, Oaktown. Fury swallowing the lump in his throat and adjusting his glasses. The head captain of the Rune Knights raised his gloved hand and rapped his knuckles against the large silver door. Enter. The muffled voice of Hyberian met his ears and Lahar opened the door. As he stepped into the room, the dark-haired mage gave a small bow of respect to the 10 wizard saints.
Hyberian-sama, I received your summons. Lahar's voice seemed to die in his throat as he took note of the shift in the arrangement of the Magic Council's meeting room, which in times of war and crisis would double as a war room. Normally, the room was simply occupied by the 10 wizard saints and filled to the brim with paperwork that would need to be done. Something which Lahar was glad to be rid of. Though he still had paperwork to perform in his position as head captain of the Rune Knight Corp, it was far less than what he had to deal with when he was basically running the entire magic community of the continent. The dark part of his mind relished in seeing the wizard saints suffer as he saw them slave over it. Especially Makarov. At least 20% of the paperwork was simply due to the dealings of Fairy Tail causing trouble as a result of their destructive habits. Lahar shook his head as he set aside that train of thought and returned to the current situation. Yes, the 10 wizard saints were all present, but their seats were now shifted a bit to make room for extra occupants. Himself included, his eyes were wide as he gazed upon the forms of the 2 most powerful members of the Rune Knight Corp, which he had not seen since he himself was a cadet under the tutelage of Han. The first figure was a man whose very presence oozed respect and authority. Of course, one would expect such an air to be a natural part of such a person's disposition as they held the ranks of both Supreme Commander of the Rune Knight Corp in addition to being King of the Kingdom of Minstrel. The man was fair-skinned and bore a lithe frame, the lines of definition of his musculature being quite paramount through his clothing, which consisted of a shirt woven out of white, gold and red silk that only covered his chest and so left the remainder of his torso bare, a seerwool made out of similarly colored fabric and a pair of dark blue shoes. A lengthy sash made of crimson and gold was wrapped around his body that served to enhance his regal appearance. Striking blue hair competed with Scheherazade's in terms of length, and it was tied into a long, messy braid which had several wavy locks falling over his shoulders. Sapphire eyes bore a cold intelligence that rivaled Zhuge Liang's, though whether or not that intelligence truly rivaled that of the crouching dragon would remain to be seen. The second figure was a woman. Like the man beside her, she too wore silk-woven fabric, though it was only made of white and gold. Her sizable cleavage was visible for the world to see, though in comparison to Scheherazade's, it was like comparing a hill to a mountain. The woman was noticeably shorter than her male counterpart by several inches and had a petite build to match it. However, her build was also consisted of a figure befitting that of a woman who had seen combat, as it was fit and bore noticeable definitions of musculature. She had eyes that were a bright reddish pink which shone with an almost childish light, not at all like the blood-colored, beast-like ones of the King of Uruk. Her lengthy pink hair was straight, reaching down to her waist, with 2 thick braids that were tied in such a manner that they jutted out from the top of her head to resemble horns. Lahar's form immediately stiffened as he placed his hands by his side and made his spine rigid. I apologize for not noticing you all sooner, Grand General Shiba and Supreme Commander Solomon. Lahar gave a low bow to the natives of Minstrel. You have both been busy since your appointments to the thrones of Minstrel 20 years ago, so I would never have expected you both to be here in Fury on such short notice. I apologize once more. Head Captain Lahar. Solomon gave a stiff nod to the younger Rune Knight. Now Solomon-kun, there's no need to be stiff with Lahar-kun. Shiba gave a less formal smile that showed a gentleness that he had not seen since his mother, may she rest in peace. Also, Lahar-kun, we made it our business to come here without causing a ruckus, so there's no need to be so loud and formal. Shiba, don't coddle the boy. Ah, but I like to coddle Lahar-kun. He was my favorite little cadet. Shiba laughed with the innocence of a child, something which seemed to highlight her beautiful features. Red eyes then turned to the new members of the 10 wizard saints. Ah, yes, but it seems that our time away from the Magic Council has left us a bit out of touch. We saw the inauguration ceremony on the Lacrima Vision, but it is really quite different when you see the people up close. Your hair really is very red, Urza-chan. Thank you. The confusion in her tone made the Grand General laugh. I apologize for my level of knowledge being so poor, Shiba-san, but if I may ask you a question. Of course. Who are you two? Urza asked. Makarov, do you not tell your guild anything? Wolfheim snarled. Solomon and Shiba haven't been in the kingdom since Operation Blackwater. The diminutive guild master waved a hand in a nonchalant manner. I don't think it's important for my kids to know about them. Wolfheim sighed, dragging a hand down his face with visible exasperation.
It was as if the old takeover magic user aged 20 years just by listening to the "I'm sorry that you have to put up with such an irresponsible guildmaster, Urza. Thank you. You wound me with your cold words, Urza." Makarov held a hand over his heart. "You really do. Anyway, so as to educate you on the subject matter, Solomon and Sheba are quite literally the best that the Rune Knight Corp in its entirety has to offer and essentially are the ones in charge of the entire corp." Wolfheim explained. The Supreme Commander is the highest rank within the entirety of Ishgar's Rune Knights. They command all the Rune Knights in the corp and possesses the strength on par with that of the 10 Wizard Saints. The same is to be said about the rank of Grand General who leads a particular kingdom or country's Rune Knights. In the case of Sheba, she controls the entire army of Minstrel and has a level of magic power comparable to that of your own guild master here. On par with Master? Urza's eyes widened as she contemplated the thought of such a young mage wielding such unfathomable power. "I do have some other questions then." "Yes?" The third strongest mage on the continent gestured for the young wizard saint to continue. "You said that with the rank of Grand General Sheba-san controls the Rune Knight Battalion of Minstrel exclusively, outside of Supreme Commander Solomon who controls the entire corp." Wolfheim nodded in confirmation as Urza continued. "Then with regards to the other kingdoms like Seven and Bosco, who rules over them as their Grand Generals? Also, who is the Grand General of Fury? You really do live in your own little bubble, don't you, Titania?" The Golden Archer laughed as he was placed on the receiving end of the fairy tale mage's glare. "Rather than glaring, you should be honored that a mongrel like you will receive an education on my kingdom from a king such as myself." "I can do without." Gilgamesh gave the redhead no chance to finish her sentence as he was already in the midst of speaking. Seven is a kingdom that is not ruled by a single royal family in the way that the other human kingdoms are. Instead, we are made up of 7 autonomous warrior clans. The 7 warrior clans of Seven each hold their own, mastering the skills unique to their own clans. Of course, some members of some clans hold some overlap in their skills. Take myself for example, where despite my title as ruler of the Archer clan, I do hold some capabilities in tune with that of the casters. Due to these specialized skills of the clans of Seven, while we do hold the alliance brought about by the Etherion Treaty, we do not believe it to be necessary to have Rune Knights in our kingdom. Especially when we have mages like the rulers acting as our overseers. As Gilgamesh-sama rightfully explained, Urza-sama, we respect the right for the kingdoms to retain their autonomy, and so Seven has no Rune Knight battalion. However, we do engage in an exchange program of sorts whereby some members of the clans can choose to take part in training for the Rune Knight Corp, while some of the corp members are sent to Seven where they can take part in an elective training session with any one of the clans to specialize in a certain field of combat. Lahar adjusted his glasses as he saw Urza nod in understanding. To answer your other question, the Grand General of Bosco is in fact God Serena himself. Indeed, the orange-haired wizard saint exclaimed as he began to take part in his bouts of dramatic posing and sparkles. However, as a god of Ishgar, I gave the title of Grand General to my wonderful sister. I didn't know you had a sister, God Serena, Warid muttered. I do Warid. God Serena laughed as he placed his hands over his heart and literally bent over backwards. She shall hold the illustrious title of Grand General within the Serena family for generations. Lahar coughed into his gloved hands to steer attention away from the flamboyant wizard saint. Yes, and also Urza-sama, with regards to Fiore's Grand General, we haven't had one for many a year. It is common knowledge that Fiore was the founding nation of the Rune Knight Corp in general. The majority of the corp's population stems from our kingdom. Lahar explained. As a result, it was thought that it would be fair that only the Supreme Commander be in charge of the Fiorean branch. Of course, with Supreme Commander Solomon being the first non-Fiorean to hold the title, there have been some concerns. Wait, so Lahar isn't in charge of the Fiore Rune Knights? Urza tilted her head in confusion. No, Lahar shook his head. Actually, Lahar-kun. About that. Sheba laughed nervously, twirling a lock of reddish-pink hair around her index finger. You will be. Insert music. Fate, Apocrypha, the Night of Rebellion. A brief pause passed between Lahar and the occupants of the room. His glasses suddenly slackened as they slid down slightly across the bridge of his nose. I'm sorry, Grand General Sheba. I don't believe I heard you correctly. It was his turn to laugh nervously. Did you just say? Yes. Solomon's voice echoed throughout the council room. Head Captain Lahar of the Fiorean branch of the Rune Knight Corp, your services and duties to not just the Kingdom of Fiore, but to the Rune Knights as a whole are commendable. You kept the entirety of the corp in place in a manner that I never could have achieved at your age, and for someone thrust into such a position in the way that you were. I can say with confidence that you did a stellar job. As such, we were contacted by Hyberian and after much discussion we have come to an agreement. Solomon and Sheba rose from their seats in tandem and suddenly their royal garb vanished from view in a flash of light to be replaced with regal sets of armor. Solomon's armor was blue and gold, a white cape strapped to his shoulders while a single ring adorned each of his gauntlet-covered fingers. 10 rings in total. Shiba's armor was pink and gold, and in her hands was an ivory and gold staff that equaled her husband's height. The staff was then handed to Solomon, and the blue-haired Rune Knight made his way over to the bespectacled head captain. Well, he's not going to be a head captain after this, Solomon thought. In the presence of the 10 wizard saints, as well as Shiba and myself, we believe that you are more than worthy of your promotion, Lahar. Oh my. Lahar didn't even feel his knees give out from underneath him. He didn't even register the fact that he was now looking up at the 2 Minstrelian monarchs until Solomon touched his right shoulder with Shiba's staff. By the power vested in me as the supreme commander of the Rune Knight Corps. The staff was passed over his head to then touch his left shoulder. By the will of the dragons. We name you, Lahar, Grand General of the Fiorian branch of the Rune Knight Corps. It took almost an entire minute before the newly promoted Grand General even made a motion to stand. He adjusted his glasses and looked to Solomon and Shiba. He could not even begin to describe his facial expression nor the feeling he was currently experiencing. To say he was shocked would be the understatement of the year. Lahar swallowed the lump in his throat before standing at attention. Thank you for gifting me this honor, Grand General Shiba, Supreme Commander Solomon. It is not a gift, Lahar. Solomon shook his head. A gift is something given out of emotion. You have earned this rank, Lahar. And I believe you are the one capable of bearing the burden of running Fiore's Rune Knights.
I will not let you down, Supreme Commander. Lahar saluted the blue-haired mage.
I certainly hope not, because your first assignment as Grand General involves a great deal of preparation. Lahar tilted his head in confusion as the 2 Minstrelian monarchs walked back over to their seats. What do you mean by that? Yes, well, please, have a seat. The vampire magic user gestured to the extra chair that had been prepared for the Rune Knight. The dark green-haired man took his seat, a small blush adorning his face as he was Givram Scheherazade. The young man was quickly forced to turn focus away from the demi-human of Desierta as Hyperion continued to speak. An anonymous tip was sent our way with regards to Grimoire Heart. Lahar's eyes widened at the leader of the 10 wizard saints. The information is dubious in nature, and we have deliberated whether or not the information could have possibly been planted by Grimoire Heart itself to try and distract us from a possibly bigger scheme they have planned. However, when it comes to members of the Balam Alliance, it is best not to look a gift horse in the mouth, and honestly, I would rather not have a repeat of the heart attack. The newly named Grand General of Fury nodded in understanding. What was the tip exactly? Grimoire Heart will be making a move on Tenro Island. Makarov was the one to speak this time. Whether or not it is coincidence that their movement coincides with that of my guild's S-class trials matters little. What matters is that we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to finally be one step ahead of that dark guild. We are going to be fighting one of the most powerful dark guilds this kingdom has ever faced, Lahar-kun. The green magic user of the Wizard Saints spoke with a level of seriousness that was practically uncharacteristic of him. You're required to go all out. All out? Yes. Wolfheim nodded. Due to being in an era of perpetual peace and prosperity, the Magic Council had changed its ideologies concerning the acts of killing criminals. Dark mages included. Ever since the launching of the Satellite Square, Aetherion to wipe out the mage villages of Iwa, Kiri, Kumo and Suna, and post-Operation Blackwater. Well, the council got tired of all the bloodshed and carnage. When you see so much of it, especially when you personally take part in the act itself, you feel the toll of it all. It weighs heavily on the conscience, but with everything that has been happening recently upon the continent, we cannot afford to hold back. Hyperion steepled his hands in front of his face, his black eyes smoldering like burning coals. A unanimous decision has been made by the Magic Council whereby incapacitating and arresting will no longer be necessary. As of today, killing is back on the table.
Lahar looked across the room. He knew things were serious, but a unanimous decision meant that Urza Scarlet and even Makarov Dreyar, the man who was practically the poster boy in the non-killing law's infancy, had agreed to this. The threshold for violence had been met and exceeded, and now it was time for violence to be met with more violence if there was any chance of this whole thing coming to an end.
The Grand General of Fury nodded his head stiffly as he adjusted his glasses. Understood, Hyperion-sama. Good. The vampire magic user nodded. Begin preparing your troops and forge your battle plans. You have 1 month.